Lindsay.
And I more than right. And also, you know, when you're not, when you haven't done
Modern technology, stick out of line 1 3.
It could be worse, Tim. It could be using semaphore flags.
Right. We'll start the stream once again. I'll reconvene the hearing. My apologies to those who were on the live stream and lost it. We did have an issue at our end, which we have now rectified. Thank you for your patience. Thanks also, Mr. Jonker, for your patience in waiting. Sorry about that.
I got nothing else to do but work. Yeah, who needs it? I'm over it, really. Yeah, thanks for giving me time, Kia ora people. How you going? I'm Des. I just wrote my submission in. Basically, I think the more people in favour of getting it done, the sooner the better. I think we've procrastinated enough. We just need to get on with it. More positive people that have that attitude, then we'll get something done. The cost is the cost. It's going to cost the ratepayers no matter what. You know, the bigger the better. Do it once, do it right. Let's get away from the whole pyramid thing. Knock it down. It's a fire hazard. Terrible idea from the start. Waste of space. Just build something that we can put as much stuff in as possible and will future-proof us. The rest of the plan, if you look at the city block, how they done it, they made everybody buy the materials at the start so the costs wouldn't go up. We need to be a bit more proactive in doing stuff like that with, you know, like I think it was Nobby's article in the Express that said that all the figures get blown out all the time. We need to start thinking like how they done at City Block and do that more often. Maybe we've spread ourselves too thin and are working on too many things at once, and we need to prioritise, especially with the way the costs are going. Like all these figures we've got now are obsolete basically week by week. The way prices are going up. Being in the building trade, it's shocking. Like our quotes will only last for three months, and then they're obsolete. Just the way prices are going. So, you know, as a council, we need to be looking at this realistically and saying all our figures and things like this are a rough guideline. We can't, you know, I don't think you should be writing them down and telling people, because that's when people get whingy and moan, because like, oh, you've said this and now it's this and blah 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 this, and, you know, and they're looking at people to shoot, which is you guys basically. You're in the firing line. But the reality is, it's happening to everybody, from the homeowner to me to everybody. I just think that we need to just lock it in and do it. Stop procrastinating and get on with it. Our museum, we got that little one down on the corner. Like, as far as the size of our town goes, that's pretty pathetic, really. I've been there, I thought, oh, is this it? You know, and like all our visitors, the one at Riverton is brilliant. I think that's a top-class museum for the size. I think we need to learn from that. Not go along the Te Papa lines. Been to Te Papa a heap. Had family that worked there, they hated it. I think it's too flashy, too showy. I'm old school. I love just wandering around museums for hours and looking at old stuff. You know, sort of my era. Takes me back to my childhood. But you know, to me, I think in our plan we talk about a cultural centre and all that, and then we talk about a museum. To me, they're two different things, just about. It's a bit ambiguous in some of it. Some of it you talk about Invercargill, some of it you talk about Southland. I think we need to be a bit clearer in what we say to the public. That's about all I have to say. I just want you guys to just to get on with it. I mean, I don't want to bitch and moan at you. I think you're doing a great job, and we're actually getting something done, which is good. But you know, time's money. The longer we procrastinate, the more the prices are going to go through the roof. I think we just need to shorten it up if we can, shorten the time frame, and lock it in and do it. I think we need to build that facility out at Tisbury because we've got so much stuff. I mean, basically the museum now is a storage shed. We've got so much stuff in there that we need to put it somewhere and then bring it to the museum or the art gallery or something. There's talk about Anderson's Park being an art gallery, but like for accessibility to the public, especially the ones in the wheelchairs and all that sort of stuff, we haven't got the room there. I don't know what you'll do with it. It's too good just to let go, but and so yeah, that's basically my submission.
Thanks,
That's all I
Des.
wanted to say.
Thanks for the practicality and encouragement in it. There was something in your submission I was quite curious
Oh,
about.
what?
Your suggestions of what could be in there. What's Bloody Jack?
Bloody Jack's a married chief.
Oh, sorry, I'm with you now. Right.
And
Yep.
they called him Bloody Jack because he used the word bloody all the time from when the English whalers came in, and so he got the name Bloody Jack. And so he's one of you know, way back in history, he's one of the local identities from the Maori point of view. But like he you know, they took him off to England and everything. He loved it. He loved it. But like that's our local history that people don't know about.
Thanks, Des. Des, I missed the nickname. My apologies.
No, that's all good, mate.
Questions, Councillor Crackett and then Councillor Amundsen.
Thank you, Councillor Ludlow. My question is a bit around you mentioned prioritisation.
Yes.
And if you have a look in what we're consulting on, not just the museum redevelopment, but
Yeah.
there's also within the annual plan Surrey Park, Rugby Park, Bluff Boat Ramp, Anderson House,
Yeah.
the water tower. We've
I
got,
know.
lots of different priorities. So what would you see in the list of things that we've got to get done? What do you see as the top priority, and what would you bump down the list?
The top priorities, I would seesaw between the water plant, because I mean, you know, with all this free water stuff, but we need good water, and the museum. I think it's, you know, a bit of a shame that we don't have a museum, a town our size. Anderson's Park is just ticking over. You know, there's no real set plan. I don't know if there is of what we're actually going to do with it. The Bluff Boat Ramp, maybe you could put a toll on it, make the boaties pay every time they use it. I don't know. You know, it's a part of our society, but there's other boat ramps around if you wanted to use them. Oh, hang on, I forgot the other ones you said. They're in here, aren't they? City upgrade. Oh, let's not talk about that.
That one's already very much in train.
Rugby Park. I mean, realistically, how many games do we have there? You know, like if you ask me, I'd bowl it. You know, for the amount of people we get coming to a Southland rugby game, do we need it? I don't know. There's a lot of money spent upgrading something that's pretty much well obsolete. You look at Sky TV, like rugby across New Zealand, we're not getting the crowd numbers. You know, all our stadiums are used for other things apart from rugby. That's where we get our numbers from. Invercargill, we don't. You know.
Am I hearing that you'd rather see it as like a multi-purpose facility, so it was used for other things rather than just rugby?
I would like to see it sold and then build something around the stadium area so we combine the car park and all the facilities around one. I mean, Southland Rugby use Surrey Park School as a training ground now. Not so much Rugby Park. You know, there's probably a bit of room there, wiggle room to move. But it's like, you know, like I said, car parking. Car parking is a big thing. If you can use a facility and then multi-purpose things around it, maybe that's a bit of a cost saver in the future. I don't know, but it has to be multi-purpose. You know, rugby is rugby. It'll always be here. Southland will never be the heights it once was. But I mean, you look at the crowd numbers, you know, 5,000 on a good night. Do we need the stadium for the cost into it? Roll it.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Councillor Amundsen.
My question's actually been answered.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, you want to bowl it too?
Des, thank you very much for your submission
that's
and,
awesome.
and your nice straightforward presentation.
Okay.
We really appreciate it.
Thanks for
I'll let you get back to work.
listening to me. Okay, guys, have a good one.
Thank you. I see Rochelle's not here as yet, but Dawn, welcome along. Oh no, she's just arriving. Sorry, no. We'll give you a chance to get comfortable. Morning, Rochelle. Perfect timing. If you make sure whoever's speaking has a microphone right in front of them, that would be really welcome. And feel free to take your mask off while you're presenting.
Okay, thank you.
Rochelle, we have your written submission on behalf of the Murihiku Kai Collective. The time is yours.
Kia ora. Kia ora koutou. Thank you for the opportunity for the Murihiku Kai Collective to speak to our written submission on the redevelopment of Te Unua Museum. So just for those who are unaware or would like to be reminded, the Murihiku Kai Collective is a strategic leadership group to help build a better local food system in Murihiku, and our goal is that good kai is accessible, affordable and sustainable. So the kind of base on which we see it as being important to submit on these kinds of things, the Invercargill City Council is acknowledging the council's mandate to uphold community wellbeing in all of its decisions, those being the cultural, social, economic and environmental wellbeings of our community. And kai, or food, intersects with all of these areas of wellbeing, so it's very, very relevant to all the decisions that council is making. So this is Dave Kennedy, one of our Kai Collective members. Dave is the Vice Chair of Farmers Markets New Zealand. Amber Jade Brass is the General Manager of Koha Kai, and I'm a Systems Innovator for Healthy Families Invercargill and help to facilitate the Kai Collective. So I'll pass over to Amber.
Kia ora, and thank you all for your time today. So Murihiku Kai Collective, we believe we have a real opportunity here with this museum to connect and engage with tamariki, weaving food throughout the museum. Local, seasonal, championed. We've got a beautiful region, so why not champion that? If tamariki are engaged, quite often the whānau will come back to those things. Our specific asks are, we would love to see edible gardens, indoor and outdoor. Our council did a wonderful job of the edible gardens so far, so why not continue with that? And telling our local food story throughout the museum as well, and inspiring that action and that engagement and that knowledge, bringing that knowledge forward for our tamariki. Yeah, thank you.
So kia ora koutou, back again wearing another hat. The local food story, we think that should permeate Te Unua Museum. I think that you have this submission Rochelle has, they've all got copies of this, is that right? Okay, so we won't repeat that too much. And also supporting the fact that good kai should be accessible and affordable, and having the facilities to ensure that there's areas for filling water bottles for breastfeeding and so forth, and nutritious food should be sold in the cafe. The other point that wasn't included that we think may have potential is at the reserve site where the storage facility is going to be built, could also be an ideal spot for growing historical plants of value. They could be like heritage fruit trees, or even for Māori, medicinal plants or plants used for different purposes traditionally would be ideal there. So we think that our historical taonga should be both artefact and living, and that there's a symbiosis between the two.
So we'd also like to reignite this conversation around having a large edible garden inside of Queen's Park. This is an idea that has been put forward in the past. I think one of the points at which it came up was around the discussion about the Chinese garden. And so here's an opportunity to see how this can be incorporated into the design of Te Unua Museum and physically connected to the museum. So also it's imperative that the council design a carbon neutral green facility. There's also an incredible opportunity in this to be build an exemplar and a building that showcases the very best of technology. Museums are about past, present and future, and helping us to learn from the past in order to imagine what the future might look like. And in terms of community wellbeing, ensuring that there are facilities, infrastructure to support active transport for both visitors and staff that work at the museum. So yes, so in essence, we are very excited about the Te Unua Museum redevelopment, and we urge the council to use this redevelopment opportunity to contribute to a local food system that is accessible, affordable and sustainable, and to use the opportunities that food presents to capture the imaginations of tamariki, local residents and visitors alike.
Thank you for your submission. Councillor Crackett.
Thank you, Councillor Ludlow. Morena, guys. Thank you very much for your submission this morning. Of particular interest to me was your mention of heritage fruit trees and the Māori medicinal medicine and the symbiosis that could create with the Tisbury Storage Centre. Does a facility like that exist in New Zealand that has heritage trees and bits and pieces like that?
The South Coast Environment Centre have had a project, an open orchards project. They've identified, I think, over 80 different varieties of apple that existed in farm orchards around Southland. So there are groups, and there's seed saver groups as well that exist. But it just makes sense, I think, that a more formal approach is taken to make sure that some of our more important fruit trees historically, and perhaps, as I said, the kind of Māori medicinal plants and so forth are acknowledged. And that would be an ideal place to include them if the space is there.
Thank you.
Councillor Soper.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Kia ora, Rochelle. While your submission says you don't have a preferred option of the three, would it be fair to say that from what you've said today and from what's in your submission, that you don't see option one as a preference?
Yes, that's right. So in actual fact, reflecting on the submission, the Murihiku Kai Collective, we discussed it, and we did kind of say that we weren't in, didn't have a preference for any particular option. But then when you look at what would be necessary to incorporate our goals and desires, then it's probably the third option that would need to be pursued, in order to give effect to our wishes.
Thank you for that.
Councillor Pottinger.
Thank you, Chair. Look, my quick question is to do with the nutritious foods. Now, the previous museum's cafe served the most amazing cheese roll known to mankind. Would the cheese roll make the cut on your nutritious food list?
Okay.
I would have thought so if it's
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Just a yes or
Cheese.
no is fine.
Yeah. Yes, and but not all cheese rolls are created equal, as you know. And the other thing we would say is if you look at the Good Food Roadmap, which the Murihiku Kai Collective has used as a basis of its submission to the long-term plan, it talks about one of the 5 kind of ideals in a good food system is for food to be culturally appropriate. So
That
you
would
wouldn't
make-
want to take away those kind of those iconic foods.
Thank you.
I'm not sure about lolly slice though.
No.
I won't ask about Lamingtons. Reverend Cook.
One thing I could add, if I may, that may be of interest. This is through my vice chair of New Zealand Farmers Markets that I've become aware of this issue. Around the country, we're struggling to have growers providing food, and most people would have noticed that in their supermarkets there's not much local food available. Southland used to produce about 80% of our food needs some decades ago. It's down to 10% now. So most farms are actually growing produce and product for export, and very little ends up in local stomachs. So we would think that by promoting the kind of things that we've been pushing for, it's actually shifting people's thinking around their value and importance of local food.
Thanks, Dave. Try not to jump over me again. Reverend Cook.
Sorry.
Atamari koutou. I'm just really mindful that what you're asking in this plan and hooking on to Te Inua and the storage facility is actually the council to go into the business of growing food. I'm not necessarily opposed to that per se, but if you look at growing food at Tisbury, which is not proximate to where the park is, that adds a
Reverend
cost.
Cook, we are heading to a question, aren't
I
we?
am heading to a question. Why do you think that it's something that we should do with ratepayers' money? Because most people who come to submit to us are looking at ways of reducing, not increasing the cost.
That's a good question. So, in what way would you justify the capital investment? And I guess it's like with anything, it's around seeing the long-term benefits of a current investment. And we've done a lot of work together with the council looking at edibles and public spaces. And what we have found is that in many cases there is no extra cost involved in substituting edibles for ornamentals. So it's really just about a redirection and reallocation into different kinds of plantings. And in addition, there is a lot of funding being released into this space. And so I believe that there are probably going to be funding opportunities if the council embraces these opportunities. Yeah.
Thank you. And thanks to the Murihiku Kai Collective for your submission. Congratulations on your Environment Award last year as well. And we appreciate you coming along to submit to us this morning.
Thank you.
Next up, the Distinction Hotel Group. Mr. Thompson, Mr. McSorley, welcome along.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to the Distinction Hotel submission this morning. My name is Luke McSorley and I work as a planner for WSP. We are assisting Distinction Hotels with the new project, and with me today is Mr. Jeffrey Thompson from Distinction Hotel Group. As the submission has been pre-read, our intention is to provide a quick overview of the project, present some images of the hotel, and then answer any questions you may have. Not sure where I'm supposed to be pointing this.
Well, we can give it a manual nudge along from here.
That'd be great.
Thank you.
Okay, so this is the master plan that was attached to the submission. So I'll just give a quick overview of this. At number 1, we have the conversion of the Menzies building to a 150 guest bed, 4.5-star hotel. At number 4, we have conversion of the former Southland Frozen Meat building to residential accommodation. So that's going to function as staff accommodation for the hotel. At number 3, we have demolition of 3 buildings of local heritage significance and replacement with a new hotel car park. At 5, we have upgrade and adaptive reuse of a building of local heritage significance at 18 S Street West. And at number 7, we have retention and reuse of a building of local heritage significance at 13 S Street West. As noted in the submission, Distinction Hotels is currently progressing resource consent, building consent and other council approvals. So the purpose of coming and talking to you today is not to circumvent those processes in any way, but to hopefully start a conversation with the council on how the development connects and functions with S Street West. As you can see by the master plan, it's quite a comprehensive redevelopment of this part of the CBD. And the only property on East Street West not involved is the Railway Hotel, which fronts Levin Street there. So if you could just click through, thank you. So that's the existing Menzies building. I'll just quickly run through some images now and then finish on 4 key points and we'll open it up. It's a 1960s former government department building. And the next image, please, is what Distinction Group's proposing. So it's basically complete recladding of new facades for the building, an extra story at the roof level, 2 additional stories to the rear wing on the crescent, and demolition of some of the existing wings of the building. If you just keep rolling through, thanks. So that's the view from the crescent. And these are the elevations. That's the view from the north. Thank you. Keep west, south from the crescent, and the east elevation. And we're just going to finish on these 4 points quickly. So the new hotel project will have significant benefits in our view for the CBD in Invercargill City. To maximise these benefits, we think the new hotel needs to integrate with S Street West and connect to the CBD effectively. I think, in our view, S Street West is badly in need of some changes, and this is a really good opportunity to revitalise that part of town. And also in doing that, achieve some really positive urban design outcomes. And to finish, Distinction Hotel Group would like to work with Council to maximise the potential benefits of the proposal. And I guess the key point here is Distinction doesn't have any ability to influence the road reserve, S Street West, that's Council's. But they'd like to work with Council to discuss where that could lead. And we think it's a really good opportunity to make some changes to that part of town. Thank you.
Thanks, Luke. Jeff, you have obvious experience with repurposing buildings, as we've seen with the Distinction in Dunedin. To what extent, ballpark, do you think you're going to require streetworks outside of East West?
Well, in an ideal world, you'd want connectivity from the transport into the hotel. So we'll have, like right now, we've got 8 of the top inbound tour operators in Stewart Island. We've brought them down. They spent yesterday going around Transport World, dig this, Motorcycle Mecca. They come back on Wednesday to do it again. So we're already out there marketing to the wholesale industry that bring tourists into Invercargill. And so we're pushing like mad to get tour coaches into Invercargill, get tourism into Invercargill, put another string to the economic bow. And I'd like to ideally see some connectivity from the hotel back through to the CBD. And we've now got the railway station being filled up. I managed to buy the building off Gear and he ended up with the railway station. So there's got to be a lot of people down that end of Esk Street. So it's an opportunity for the CBD. So, you're looking at a few hundred extra people that potentially can wander around the CBD. Our itineraries are trying to be based around 2 days. for a lot of these people to actually give them time to wander around the town and hopefully part with some of their hard-earned cash. So that's the ultimate aim of it. So we've started their marketing campaign. They're over the Stewart Island now because we're trying to leverage that. They'll be back on Wednesday. We're taking them to the Ascot and the Langlands and trying to work in with other local operators to try and grow the town. So
Thank you.
Yeah, it's quite important.
Councillor Crackett.
Thank you, Councillor Ludlow. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you very much for being here, and thank you for
Do you want to pull that microphone in, please, Alex?
your proposal, which is really quite substantial and exciting for the city. My question is around project prioritisation and timelines. So obviously we haven't consulted on anything to do with streetscapes in this area, and you can see we've got quite a stacked line up there that we need to address. What's your timeline for this proposal, and when would you be looking to require these works?
On Tiger for Punishment, we've started selling the rooms from September 23. So hopefully if we can get the supply chains to actually keep up with things, it's we'd like to think we can be open by then. But if we aren't, you know, we'll work around that at the time. There are other accommodation options in town, and depending on how many people come. And tourism tends to start slowly. You'll get a few start and then it builds. So if we're not quite ready then, but I'd like to think we can be. So so if we could have something resolved by then, it'd be really nice. If we can't, well, hey, we'll just have to live with what we've got, and I understand that. But you guys don't know what, you know, opportunities are out there in the future if we don't tell you. Yeah.
Councillor Pottinger.
Thank you, Chair. Jeff, as a councillor, we have various projects happening and stuff at the moment, and we're constantly being made aware of escalating costs, in fact, exponentially. So, in your world, do you see this as a problem for you? Because obviously you've just answered the question, this is going to happen right now. So, you have no problem with what current costs, you know, construction costs, supply, you know, supply is one thing, but you're not deterred?
Ian, I'm getting old and stupid, and I'm not really worried about the cost, it's about the outcome. So for me, if it costs me a lot more than it should, and I don't get a return, I don't mind. It's not necessarily about, this is not done in a normal business model. So as far as costs and return on costs, it's not the number one priority for me, it's the outcome.
No, excellent, congratulations.
Thanks. Luke, handy that you're here. Maybe you can speak to this next question. How long have you allowed for a regulatory process?
Well, we haven't, Darren, is a simple answer to that. It's sort of, I don't know how long it'll take. We've put our submissions in. We're still a few months away from getting the architectural and engineering finished. And hence September 2023, if it can be achieved, it can be achieved. If it can't, well, hey, that's it. It's sort of, I'll try not to get a heart attack between now and then and run with what happens.
Thanks. Luke, anything to add there?
We'll just add that there's an application in currently for conversion of the building to visitor accommodations permitted in the zone. So it's actually an application for the demolition works and height extensions over 10 metres.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Chair. Very quick question, Jeff.
Can you take your mask off, and can you make sure you're right into that mic? Thank you, Graham.
Thank you, Chair. Suitable staff resources in Invercargill, linking them with any plans like SIT trainings or?
We tend to find that when we start a hotel up, we'll bring staff, key staff in from the other hotels. And that's why if you look at the old state building just past the side of the Menzies building, there's a 4-bedroom apartment up there. The other building, the other heritage building we're keeping is a 1-bedroom apartment there. And the old Menzies, not the Menzies, the old South and Frozen Meat 4-storey tower will end up with 16 units there, so 16 apartments. So we'll have a reasonable number of staff accommodation units to be able to bring staff in. The staff is a real problem at the present point in time. So we'll, depending on what happens with the government, we'd like to think that we can bring some skilled staff in from overseas, because there aren't enough around New Zealand. Every area that we operate in, we struggle for staff.
That's what I was wondering. Thank you.
So it's, yeah.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks.
Yes, sir.
Councillors, any further questions? Councillor Pottinger.
Sorry, just one more question. In Dunedin, you won an award with the design of your car park there. It's quite stunning, the etchings and everything. The car park you're proposing, is that going to be sort of centred around our cultural sort of significance and bits and pieces?
Well, when you say the cultural significance, the etchings that we put on the car park there and the colour and the grille was done by the architect to sort of link in a wee bit with the era of the building behind us. And when we put that forward to the council, the heritage people, for old Glenn, they really didn't like it. It took us about 7 months to get across the board, and then after we built it, we actually won heritage awards from Heritage New Zealand, from the city council in Dunedin, and then they put it forward as an example of what to do in the heritage precinct. So I'm not quite sure how it all works in, but the outcome was quite good. I was happy with the final product. Mind you, I was happy with the design, but the final products.
So we're going to expect something similar?
Absolutely. Using the same architects.
Cheers.
Thank you. Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, Luke. Really appreciate the submission. Good luck with the project, and thanks for making the time available to come along this morning.
And thank you for providing the time and the opportunity.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Dawn, this time.
Good morning, Mayor Tim and councillors. This is my first attempt at this wonderful meeting. Thank you.
It's all right, Dawn.
for the
We've got a safety
opportunity.
net. You'll be fine.
Thank you. That's perfect. This submission that I've put forward with the design of the whale, the right whale, I know that you've had material to read on it. I feel it would be something that's quite striking, and it's something that's totally original. And one of the major things that I didn't put in this was that the form of it needs to be a flowing form, not something that's made from boxy shapes like I've seen in other cities in New Zealand and local places. Whales have a wonderful outline, and they're so free moving, so I feel that the look of it needs to have that character to portray it truly. We feel it's important to future-proof, in other words, prepare for the long term of the New Southland Museum and Art Gallery. I'm talking about, I'll just go on, I think. It's critical going forward that we're able to tell our stories from natural to social history and have them safely recorded. Natural history entails the land and the sea of our province. Social history, meaning our Southland branch of history that emphasises social structures and the interaction of different groups in our local region. Recording Southland stories and encompassing both relics and the modern, creative and history, arts and literature, music, dance, theatre, pottery, ceramics, painting, film, in other words, our treasured heritage. This will require both air conditioning and large storage bays. That is very important. A building represents the lives we have led, and the structure stands as our stamp and will distinguish Southland as a centre of culture and learning. It is essential that today's plans are extended with space, not adequate for today. The local talents and skills need to be acknowledged, safely preserved and showcased for education and pleasure. The architectural designs must encompass grand plans for future generations for both local and international scholars. What we need desperately is amazing storage. Can you think of airports? I've got a school. I've got 3 rooms. I haven't got much room left in it, and that's all through my artwork. So if that gives you an idea of what I'm talking about with a museum, scale of work is major, and it all needs to be at the right temperature. it needs the right people working there. And I think that this city has had a really good time with our artwork around the city at the moment. We're always happy to support you, and it's a great opportunity to have people from overseas come here, as well as New Zealanders. It would be a draw card, I feel. Thank you.
Thanks, Dawn. Councillors, open for questions. Reverend Cook.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Tēnā koe. Dawn, are you aware that the Southern Right Whale imagery is already being used in a new build in Invercargill? I'm just asking because you're talking about it being
Not at
unique,
all.
and
I'm
therefore
sorry.
it won't be.
No, I had no idea.
No, that's fine. I appreciate the effort that you put into and the imagination and all the rest of it. I'm just sorry that you weren't aware that that was a particular imagery that's already been done. If it couldn't be that imagery, you're still wanting something that has flow.
Yes.
Something that has shape rather than.
Yes. I don't want to see a woolshed form with a face on it. Does that give you the picture? And the face is all turned from blocks and this sort of thing. You know, I could draw you that too.
No, I appreciate the imagery, and I appreciate the effort that you went into. I just thought I needed to share with you that, sorry, somebody got there before.
Can you tell me where it is?
Mirihiku Marae, the new Whirikai and office block.
Oh, that's
It's the shape of the Southern Right Whale, or the influence by the Southern Right Whale. But thank you, because I think out of all the submissions that, apart from what some of the tamariki drew, this is the only one that's actually given us an idea of a potential shape or a flow. So thank you for
that's
your
very flattering.
artistic
Thank you.
thought.
Thank you.
Thanks for that. Councillors, any other questions? Councillor Soper.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dawn, kia ora. I also just want to say thank you, because there's been a lot of submitters have said they would like the pyramid shape retained, but you're probably the only one who's come up with something quite so imaginative and meaningful. And as Ms. Cook said,
you're going to have me in tears. Thank you.
As Ms. Cook said, the idea has been used by Mirihiku Marae, and it's going to be brilliant. It is a great idea. I just wondered, because of some of the things you've said today and in your submission, did you have time to think about the separate storage building? And from what you said today, do you think that that is a good idea, that we have that separate storage building?
The storage building, well, I know there's plans for use of the concrete tennis courts or something for storage.
The proposal was that we build a separate storage building on what is currently the Tisbury Reserve.
Right.
So it would be a completely separate storage building that would not just be for the museum, but also for the Invercargill Public Art Gallery and potentially other collections to be stored as a separate storage building.
You probably wouldn't want it too far away, because everything would have to be trolleyed or covered, you know, to get it there. Like inside the museums I've been in overseas, they have on wheels with big frames, like pipes, that move everything around. And of course the weight, you have to consider people working with that as well, because I've got larger frames now and I'm finding it a bit more tricky, and my frame is now going to deliver to me. So there's little points like that that need to be taken into consideration. And then you've got to think about how they're going to move around in the building as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Been a fair
Not
bit of
bits of
thought
doors
put into
off.
that.
Yeah.
Thank you for those comments.
Thank you. Councillors, any other questions? If not, a thought-provoking... Oh, sorry, Your Worship.
Yes. Congratulations on acknowledging the whale. But we have had displays, of course, in the pyramid. And I'm just wondering how you resolved that rather bloodthirsty era and into modern art. Is that a challenge?
It gives
for
me
you?
something to think about, Tim. Thank you. Thank you. It would be quite interesting to have something in the interior, wouldn't it? Yes.
Thanks for that. Dawn, thank you for your submission. Thanks for giving up time to come along and be with us this morning. We appreciate it.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thank you so much. Lovely experience. Thank you.
Robin Brash. Welcome along, Robin. Thank you for your submission.
Well, first of all, thank you for letting me come, but I've never been to a thing like this, and I'm very pleased I came in early to see what goes on. I take it everybody has read what I put in, right? And we were talking about the submission, but one before me, I'm just going to change subject for a second, mentioned the new hotel block that's been built, or hoping to be built. It wasn't on the submission at all that or the proposal you put up, but it has given me reason to bring something up as far as prioritising in the city at present for the councillors. And number one priority, I would think, would be making the city safe. We've got all the cameras out of action at present. The funny thing, our sports project can have, I think, about 20 project cameras working. It'll be on a part of their maintenance program, I presume, just like your roads in the city. When you get a pothole, you fix it. I'd like to ask the question of why these potholes, which are individual cameras, haven't been fixed. Sorry, but I know that's way out of order, but I feel it is justified to ask and get it put up to a very top priority. Safety is paramount. But it just happened I was here and saw that. You've all read my proposal, or proposals, or thoughts, which they really are. But one of the things it starts off with is, will it be used? As it says, within 15 years, I've been to in Invercargill, I've been to the museum about that number of times, maybe more. 13 of them would be to see the tuatara. In the last couple of weeks, I've been talking about this at my work, where we have smoke over 30 people and various things, and none of them had heard that the tuataras were being shifted. And then they said, well, don't build it. That is the feeling out there. And some of them even said, why not bring some geckos in with it and call it South Seas or something, that people understand what it is, and have all the lizards of New Zealand in there. So kids can go along. You can take kids to a wet day, and then they'll see the rest of all the good things and the heritage of New Zealand and what have you, and want to go back. I didn't know what Te Papa was in Wellington and went to it. There were only two things in it. One was a motorbike and the other was a wee room. And in that wee room you saw the history of New Zealand. Sadly lacking a lot of mariculture, there wasn't very much of that in it. But an amazing room that made me, when I had some spare time in Wellington, go back again. A feature of this new development could be two type of wee rooms. One that does the beginnings of New Zealand, how it was formed, and go through the people as races and what have you as they came to New Zealand and developed themselves. And including what one of the previous speakers said about the Maori chief, and all these things are missing. And the other, on the other area, you could have, these are only about 20-minute settings that they have at Te Papa. You could have one on people's histories, what they've done in New Zealand. George Begg and his racing cars, the things that have gone on at Rugby Park, Tirratonga, the developments we've had, our original power scheme, Manapori, and there's lots of things that have happened in New Zealand in sporting events. That could just be part of it. I'm not against a museum at all, but I do look at here on a project I've just looked at, 180 million for the city development block. Is that roughly the total figure at present, or is that just this council's figure? I'm just asking this as a
total figure.
As a guideline?
Total figure.
Total figure. You realise that you're talking 74 million to build one museum, and they can build a whole city block for 180 million? Where is the costing? On my rates, for me to go to the museum, if you take what I'm going to pay in rates according to this piece of paper, is 75 times $1 a visit for 2 visits a year. That's if I go on my own. And then we're calling it a name, which I've got nothing against the Maori part of it. But if you talk, I don't even know what that means. Half of the public, if you put that name up on front and tourist booking agency wouldn't know. Whereas you put up something like South Seas Museum, people would understand when they get to it and everything. It's part of our history and we want to know it. But not many people that come from overseas can understand the Maori language or whatever. And I'm not against the Maori language, but we've got to get them through the door. This is what I'm trying to emphasise. No one will mind paying this if it will get people through the door. But I guarantee when before the museum was closed, the biggest attraction at the museum was the tuataras. Now build on it and you'll build on your museum. That's what people know about throughout New Zealand. And read the shape. I haven't heard a bad comment apart from us locals about the shape of it. People say, what's that unusual structure? It catches attention, and that's what we want. You look down the street and see this from a way out, and it's high enough that you could put a lookout, as you say. I mean, I'm not worried if you rebuilt something, have to rebuild, but don't spend millions on something just for looks. You've got to, it's what you put in it that matters. And you've got to get people going away talking about it. And they'll bring the people back. So if Invercargill wants to do something that people understand and want. But think of the cost. Nearly half of the city block being spent on one building. I do ask whether that's justified. Well, that's roughly all I've got to say.
Thank you, Mr. Brash. I've got time for one question. Councillor Crackett.
Oh, thank you, Councillor Ludlow. I think I might have just snuck in just before you did.
Sorry, could you speak up a wee bit, please?
Sorry. I wanted to ask you whether or not you'd read in the proposal that for the reimagining of the facility, the tuatara will partially be included, not the whole facility. There'll be a purpose-built facility for tuatara out with the rest of the animal husbandry, but there will still be a tuatara enclosure within the proposed new museum. So
I'm actually saying, I hadn't realised that.
Yeah.
But
so I thought you might find that fantastic.
It wants to be as good as what's there, and if you want to expand on it, I remember catching geckos when I was at school and various things. I'm not saying you let them catch them, but build on that. People love those tuataras. Build on it. We've got to get people through the door. Not worried about taking money off them, because the people coming is good for the province. It's good for the hotels, it's good for everything. But to get them through the door. How many people actually go somewhere to go to a museum? But if the kids know grandkids and everything throughout New Zealand are looking to see the tuataras when they come to Southland again. I know it because I've got grandkids, and that's what gets people through. It's got to be used.
Cool. Thank you, Mr. Brash. Thank you for your submission and the additional points that you've made this morning following the earlier submissions that you heard. Really appreciated.
Thank you.
Malavika, would you like to bring Chris Henderson in, please? Chris, if you could unmute yourself, please.
How's that?
Perfect, thank you. Thank you for your submission, Chris. The time's yours.
I realise time.
Sounds like we've got a little bit of buffering going on there, Chris. You're dropping out.
I had it sorted last. I think it's your fault.
Nothing wrong with the Wi-Fi in town. It's one of those challenges, I think, from rural Wi-Fi.
Because it worked like once.
No, Chris, it is. It's dropping out very frequently.
I'm trying to hold it like I did last time. Right. You've read my submission. It's backed up now by a late edition, the Guardian article, which I urge you to read if you obviously haven't already, because I've just put it in. Thanks from Emily. So it's low carbon is my emphasis. Heritage is my emphasis, being a child of Invercargill, remembering the trams and all the things that we had that we've now lost, and also being part of Historic Places Trust for a gazillion years. The cost, as Mr. Brash mentioned, is 76 million or whatever it was, 170 million, whatever, and rising, 70 million and rising. To me, it's a travesty to add more expense to the ratepayers of Invercargill and also Southland when we can utilise our heritage buildings. And the time, Darren, I don't know if you've got a timeline. I haven't read the articles, the position papers, but the timeline will be to build this new storage facility and all the other things. We've already lost 4 years without a museum. And as I said in my submission, we've got a blueprint there. We've got our present temporary museum popped into H&H's building. It works fine. It's a blueprint for other ones. And I'd just like us to be a bit more creative. So, and the other thing that keeps haunting me, which I had from SMAG, was the intent of the Invercargill City Council to have Invercargill celebrating its preserving its heritage character. And I think this is the bit that's sort of at the background of all my involvement with museum and Friends of the Museum. And I'd like to echo Mr. Brash's comment about the tuatarium. You'd notice in my submission I had a laminated timber frame to secure the pyramid and all the uses that I had for that. The tuatarium, of course, was the key one, but an observatory and a viewing platform and all the other things that I included in my list all could be part of that for a modest sum. 6 million has been quoted as making it a safe place for storage. This is the pyramid, but if we add a bit more to that for actually strengthening and replacing that pillar and doing the other bits and pieces without the weight of additional storage upstairs and a planetarium, it could be quite a splendid place and reflect, of course, Russell Beck's love of stargazing and astronomy, as well as attracting more children and their families into the planetarium and the tuatarium. Boy, what a combination that would be. And of course, remembering Nobby's comment about
You just dropped out for a second there, Chris. Did you move?
No.
There you go, you're back.
I breathed. With Jocelyn and Nobby both saying the town needs to be painted red or any other colour. That was the bit that prompted me to put that into my submission. But I note darkly that it shouldn't be 50 Shades of Grey, so I really emphasise that point. You're allowed to laugh. That's meant to be. And all the other ideas, I mean, we've got...
No, you moved again.
I breathed again.
There you go.
Kidfest. Good. Carafa technology. Kidfest attracted huge number. I want the kids. Centre of town and also out to the pyramid, and these sorts of things would attract them. Right, I think that's about it. I've got plenty of other stuff, including how to make buildings safe with carbon fibre techniques and things. But that's for another day, because time, I realise, is not on my side, and nor is sound. I'm happy to take questions.
Thanks, Chris. Questions, councillors? No, Chris, you'll be relieved to know that we're going to let you breathe.
Oh, great.
Thank you very much for joining us and for making your submission.
You're very welcome. Thank you for the opportunity, Darren. Thank you,
Thanks,
councillors.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Richard Rongan, welcome along. Take a seat. Don't mind the trapdoor. Have a seat. And feel free to take your mask off while you're presenting as well. Or on, it's your choice.
Kia ora tātou, he mihi nui ki koutou. He mihi. Tui ki prangi tu nei, tui ki papata nei, tui ki te whaiao, tui ki te amarama, ti hei, te mauri ora. I was going to deliver a bilingual element, but for sake of time, some elements I will still engage, but will also translate so that it can be clear for the record what it is that I'm intending, my own interpretation. In the first instance, the first greeting should always go to the All Creator, to the kaiwhakaora of us all, the one that the Creator of all things good. The second and most important is a mihi to the land that we stand upon, because it is the place that has nurtured us and kept us well unto this day. And also I'd like to give reference to this beautiful whare, the whare nui of the administration building, City Council. And again, there's a lot of history that goes along with this building. The generations of people who have contributed to its existence. As I now turn to think about and acknowledge the people who have recently had loss, and I particularly refer to the events of Easter, where there were 5 very tragically taken deaths, or 2 events that took 5 people from our community. But I also take this moment to consider all of the other people that have been part of the lives of Southland, who have withdrawn from this mortal coil over a period of time. And I acknowledge some of the older people who will have very clear memories of some of the other councillors and mayors, and the person that I had some direct dealings with quite some time ago, Mayor Eve Paul. But again, I go back to all of the others that have gone before her and before us today. Ki ngā ko haere ki te pō. Haere atura. I turn to you now as councillors and people that are present in this room, the kānui ora of this organisation, and particularly those of you seated around the table, and for those that are on this wonderful device that allows us to also conduct business at a distance. I mihi to you as the the faces of the organisation that is the City Council. And to you, Darren, as the manuturu for today, the chair for today, greetings. Claire Hadley, also as our CEO, it's finally good to see half a face that I can put a name to. And of course, there are the other councillors that sit around the table. Mayor Tim, e mihi. The other party that I would like to mention at this point is the partner of the treaty. Our mana whenua representative seats here at the table as well. E mihi, e mihi, e mihi. Now I turn to the people that sit behind us, and particularly those who are from Cooper's Creek, who I stand alongside in respect of submissions regarding that one-line entry that I found in amongst a whole lot of papers referring to charges that and costs and all of that sort of stuff being increased over time as part of a long-term plan. I think that's without them, I wouldn't be here actually, because it was really out of recognition of the combined histories that exist in and around Cooper's Creek, particularly our Waitohu whānau that live there, the early settlers that arrived and did whatever they did out there, including the whaling and sealing and whatever else was part and parcel of the environs of the time. And as part of this, I think this whole exercise of us addressing the ongoing connection with that little place, that community, is one that I think is something that I'm quite proud of being part of, the history of that area. So I'd like to acknowledge these two sides coming together for us here today. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou. I now turn to the kaupapa really of the submission that I put forward, and I understand from this little exercise that this is our opportunity to address some of the issues that still remain unresolved, which is really the crux of the matter. By the same token, I had to have a look at our at the documentation, and when I looked at the crest, and I found the Latin underneath that basically translates to for the benefit of the community. Now, as part of the community, and I'm referring to the ratepayers and others, the costs that are being incurred currently for everybody, primarily due to the changing world that we live in, and particularly the COVID effect, and with the war again, the war in Europe, there are impacts that are being felt across the community. So this idea of being faced with additional charges over and above what I understood was custom and practice with the relationship with licensed occupy holders at Cooper's Creek and the council. But again, there are other people that will be speaking to that as well. I've referred to the coat of arms, but then I also acknowledge the importance of something as simple as the vision statement of the council. He ngākau aroha, our city with heart. Now for me, the importance of aroha as part of that statement is that it outlines very much the intent of engagements that we are into today, but also in engagements that have happened previously. It is about having compassion, respect and understanding of each other's position, being benevolent to some extent and caring, kind-hearted. Those are the words that I have as key. But it doesn't feel like that was the way that things have played out in respect of the charges that have already been put to the leaseholders or the licensed occupiers at Coopers Creek. So that is why today I stand before you and make this submission, and I'll leave it at this. And I would like to finish with a little gift that's been given to us all by a band from Dunedin, 660, the little pepeha. And how does it go? My maunga, mana is my maunga. Aroha is the moana. Whānau is my waka. E tū atu nei. So, the mana that you hold as councillors is really important for it to be delivered. But by the same token, in the pepeha, it talks about that ocean of love, compassion, care and concern for each other. In all of the dealings that we are having with one another as either ratepayers or others that are engaging with the council in whatever format. And on that note, I won't sing it to you, I'll just leave you with that thought. Oreira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, kia ora tātou katoa.
Richard, thank you for your kōrero and very articulate presentation. I was kind of looking forward to a bit of a waiata there, I thought.
Oh, well, I think we could wind up with one that we could all share a bit later on, perhaps.
Councillors, it's open for questions. Reverend Cook.
I beg leave, Mr. Chair, to respond.
Please.
To Richard. Tēnā koe, Richard.
Kia ora.
Mea tuatahi, ki te whakahoki, te mihi, kia rātou, kua mene atu ki te pō. Te parikura I tēnei wāhi, I te wāta āranga, I nāku pauri. Mo tēnā whakaro e hoki atu te mihi ki a koe. Aha kono Ngāti Kahanuni koe, e noho koe I Waikanui I a mātou, mo hei wārua. Ko whakahokia te mihi ki a koe, o tō mihi ki a mātou te mana whenua, ki a mātou na kaitiaki o tēnei rohe. Mō reira tēnā koutou. I just, for those of you who don't know, I know Richard quite well and I've known him a long time. I want to acknowledge that he acknowledged the very heavy grief that was amongst our community at Easter. And I especially want to acknowledge the fact that you counted to 5. It's been a real mamai for me that the death of Chad was overlooked in the death of the others. I don't diminish their deaths, I just want, and I'm grateful that you did acknowledge that. So I thank you for that. I thank you for the fact that you have acknowledged all of us and that you have used our reo to garnish and to enhance your kōrero to us this morning. So thank you, Mr. Chair, for the leave to respond to Richard. It's most appropriate that we do so. And thank you for your whakaro for those who have gone before us, including Mayor Paul, who I do remember quite well, but to remind us that we are rooted in the past and what we're discussing today is for the future, but we have to take that past with us to construct that future. So thank you for that.
Richard, can you remind me where in a process the residents of Coopers Creek are at? Because I know that you took your concerns to the Ombudsman, so is that still a work in train?
I guess to a great extent that's going to depend very much on how things progress. I believe that it's still unresolved and that there is still a way forward. And I'm sure that if we were to, well, I put my Dutch hat on, or my clogs on now, if I were to ask the question about how much this whole exercise has cost us as ratepayers, I would be I wouldn't be too shocked at what might be reported. But at the end of the day, a lot of this this backwards and forwards could have been resolved quite easily by having a sit down around a table and perhaps having some pie and perhaps sharing a bit of hospitality with one another, as opposed to going down the path of the Ombudsman and legal. But again, we all have to have an understanding of where each other stands. So that's perhaps not something that we need to enter into at this point. But
Thanks,
in answer to your question, it's still unresolved.
Thank you. Councillors, any other questions? Councillor Pottinger.
Look, it's a really a matter of clarity. I asked before this meeting of our in-house legal advisor, Michael Morris, if there were any legal things happening at the moment between the residents and council, in the sense that it would be heading towards a tribunal or a court, just in case, obviously, we didn't want to prejudice the happenings of that court. Now, is there something legal happening? You just mentioned the word legal. So
I mentioned the word legal because I understand there's been a legal opinion, and from what you're saying, there has been a legal opinion on behalf of the council, and that's
okay,
completely understandable.
It's just
as far as the way where it proceeds, it will depend.
No,
very
that's
much
fine. No, question's answered. It's just an opinion. No, that's fine. Thank you.
Kia ora.
Yep.
Any other questions? If not, thank you very much for your submission, Richard. Ngā mihi nui. Gila, thank you for coming along this morning.
As part of the tikanga, I will sing you a quick waiata, and I'll keep it short. And I know you, many of you will know the words, so please join in. Te aroha, te whakapono, me te rangi mari e tātou tātou e. Kia ora tātou.
Kia ora.
Robert and Kerry.
Hello. Before I start my submission, I'd just like to clarify, we were supposed to have a meeting with the council. We'd already had a meeting with them on the 11th of April, and we're supposed to have a follow-up meeting early May, but they have postponed it till the 25th of May. In regard to Michael Morris and legal opinion, the council aren't prepared to share their legal opinion with us. We've asked for it twice through our lawyer and through the LGOIMA twice, but for some reason they're choosing not to be transparent with their legal opinion. So I'd just like to clarify that before I start. Right, on behalf of all the residents at Coopers Creek, we wish to object to the 22-23 proposed increase in rental fees for crib sites at Sandy Point Domain as detailed in your letter dated 5th of April. The residents at Coopers Creek are currently disputing the 60% rental increase imposed on us in 21-22 fees and charges, and to date this has not been resolved. Please refer letter attachment detailing our reasons for disputing the 21-22 increase, which I attached with the submission. Note the second last paragraph of the letter details how the Oakey Street section only rates decreased to $306.26. Our rentals increased from $815 to $1,350. We were forced to pay this out of fear that our licences would not be renewed and to avoid incurring bad debt. The council was repeatedly requested to place the rental invoices on hold while under dispute, but refused to do so. The average age of the licence holders at Coopers Creek is approximately 70, the oldest being a 93-year-old widow, who is Bob's mother, and most are on limited incomes. For 75% of licence holders, it is their home and only asset. For the last 20 plus years, our rentals have increased in line with the ICC rates as detailed in Clause 4 of the ICC Memorandum of Understanding in regards to the village of Coopers Creek, also attached. It is important to note that we have never received individual notification or consultation regarding any increase in our rentals for any year until your letter dated 5th of April 22. That leads us to believe that none of the previous increases were valid. We do not believe that a single line on page 37 in the long-term plan under fees and charges without any amount showing represents reasonable or fair consultation. And that was the line that I've cut and pasted. And this year, it's even worse because there's 2 lines with no figures. Could you just pass? So hang on, I could do half this side. So in the 22-23 annual plan, we have got 1 line that's showing 21-22 market appraisal per square metre and 22-23 market appraisal per square metre. We don't even know the amount. Like, for all we know, that could decrease. And I looked up the meaning of the word consultation in this morning on Google. The action or process of formally consulting or discussing. For example, they improve standards in consultation with consumer representatives. We've had no discussion or consultation. We get 1 line in the plan until this year. And $1,350 is not the total cost we pay. We pay approximately $500 a year to take household rubbish to the dump. We pay $300 a year to empty our septic tank. So we're actually paying over $2,000 where we are. The rigid licence to occupy terms actually devalue our properties. There is no security. Banks won't loan on them. In fact, the sale of one of the properties fell through recently after a lawyer advised the purchaser not to proceed after reading the terms in the licence to occupy. That's actually costing people money. The licence to occupy terms change without notice or consultation. All of the clauses in the past that have favoured the lessee have been removed and more restrictive measures put in their place. That is why the MOU was introduced, to make it fair for both parties. We are not asking for favours, only to be treated fairly. We will never have grid electricity to our homes, which is fine by us, and we have chosen to live off the grid. But by the same token, you cannot value land that will never have electricity or services at the same rate as land that do have those features, which is exactly what has happened. The valuation is flawed, and the areas that we have been compared to, i.e. Oakey Street, Maui and Stewart Island, are all freehold, so it is not comparing apples with apples. I emailed all of you on the 5th of October and made you aware of our situation, and only Nobby Clark replied. I did approach Alan Arnold in person. So apart from Alan, I would like each of you to tell me why you didn't consider a 60% rental increase worth addressing. Can we start with you, Leslie?
No, you can't. You may ask rhetorical questions, but you're not here to ask questions of us. You're here to make a submission, and we can ask questions of you. I'm sorry, that's the process.
Okay. Right. Why have we had another market appraisal undertaken within 2 years of the last one? Invercargill valuations are done every 3 years. What does that cost the ratepayer? If the valuation goes down, do the rentals fall? Oakey Street section valuations went up, but the rates decreased. The owners there get to appreciate the capital gains with increases of freehold property. We are guardians of the area we are in. We love living out there. We've phoned the police regarding fires, firearms, helped lost people, rescued people at sea. You've taken the ranger away from the area and removed the house. So there is no security. That's all I've got to say.
You covered it all.
Thank you, Rob. Anything you'd like to add?
No, I'm good, mate.
Councillors, it's open for questions.
Have you noticed any increase in vandalism and things since the houses at the Ranger have been removed?
Absolutely, and to the area, because like four-wheel driving.
Yeah.
The area looks terrible. The grass has been left to go long, and it's quite unkempt.
Do you think it's actually since that like noticeably since the Ranger and the house has gone?
Well, I know that the last ranger did a really good job, and he was a hard worker, and he was like rescuing people stuck at the beach and things. I'm not sure that was part of his role, but I know that he was only if we rang, he was only too prepared to come and help at all hours of the day and night.
Lockie was there working every day, all day, and doing clean out, and where the town rangers now do two laps a day, one in the morning, one in the afternoon, just basically a lap.
and they may pick up some loose rubbish, but they're not really caring for the area, just observing and looking to see if there's any issues. And then they must report back to the parks and action it from there.
And also a lot of the areas, like the park recreation areas, have been locked. No one, public can't get access to them. Now I don't know that's because people were doing wheelies in them and so they just locked them. But I believe you've actually got to ring and get permission to actually go onto the areas. Like all of the
Dapple
picnic
Bay is
areas.
always locked up. You can't go into the bay. Years ago, people used to go there for
which bay?
Dapple Bay.
Oh,
Yeah. That's locked the gate, so no one can plan a weekend. Well, most people, if they want to go for a barbecue, they shoot out and just do it on the day. You can't do that. You got to pre-plan it. And Invercargill's
been around for a while. Didn't know that actually.
Well, Whalers Bay has been planted out in shrubs now. It's not even a picnic area. They've just closed that area. They're just closing the areas up. I don't know why. It's just to stop the mowing for costs. But from where it used to be years ago, it was a family-orientated reserve for the people. It's being locked up for some reason.
Yeah, it's a great
Through the chair, thanks, Alan.
Through you, Mr. Chair, it's a great asset.
Thanks. Questions? Councillor Pottinger.
Thank you, Chair. Look, I've read extensively the MOU. Now, what year was that made? It's got 1992, it was gazetted, but is that the year of the MOU?
No, the 1992, the area was gazetted as a reserve.
So the MOU, the draft of this MOU was done when?
Mr. Bill Watt wrote it, and he said that he thought it would be about 1990.
1990, this one. Okay.
Yeah, but the council can't find a copy of it.
Right.
On their records.
Okay, we have no copy.
Apparently, you've got the copy I supplied you.
The council, from the correspondence we've had, they want to find a sealed, signed copy dated. And up to date, they refused acknowledgement of it because they can't find it.
And this copy belongs to one of the...
It's been issued.
All of us have got it.
Right.
Issued by the council with their leases to occupy.
Okay.
It's an added to the leases. And the lease is dated when you first take it. So that's just to add a piece of paper to the lease.
And we sign and date the licence to occupy. The licence to occupies have changed from leases to licence to occupy. They've changed over the years, and I don't think any one of us have got the same licence to occupy.
Right, the MOU was 1990, I think.
About around that, that's when Bill Watt thought it was, when he wrote it.
Okay, thanks.
There's a bit of history.
Just one more quick question. The licence to occupy that you have now, and you used to have a lease before, did the lease before have a term on it? So you mentioned before that you've got no equity in your properties, banks won't loan against them. Has there been a time when you actually had a lease, like a 10-year lease or a 15-year lease, which actually would give the properties value?
There are 21-year leases out at the properties out on the way to the beach. I think it's something Parade.
There,
yeah, but I don't think Cooper's Creek have ever had 21-year leases. I think it's always been year to year. They were leases, and they've been changed to licence to occupy.
Annually.
Annual, yeah.
Thank you.
But the MOU states in there that it will have a licence of recurrence. Recurrence is the bit. It's renewable.
Oh, a permanent right of renewal.
Right of renewal. Because back in '90, I think we had a similar situation with the rates increase from the low hundreds to 400, I believe. But we've got numerous emails to clear. And
so, through you, carry on. So you do have a permanent right.
No, we don't.
No, the memorandum of understanding, item 2, the licensee of any crib site shall be granted an annual licence to occupy with a permanent right of renewal, provided all the conditions of the licence to occupy continue to be met. And item 4, when the licensor does grant to the licensee a renewal of this annual licence, on its renewal, the licence fee and any rates imposed by the Invercargill City Council on the property shall be subject to review. The total of any rates imposed and the licence fee together shall not exceed the current licence fee in the first year, and any increases in future years shall not exceed the percentage rate increase for Invercargill City.
Right. That's
Councillor, I've just had a message that some councillors are hard to hear because you're not using the microphone.
Well, I'm asking too. No, that's fine. Thank you very much. So that's the original document
that was issued with the license to occupy.
Right, how long ago?
Started back to 1990.
1990, yeah. Cool.
Thank you. Any further questions, councillors? If not, we know the matter is in train. We appreciate the concerns that you're raising and for also coming along to address us this morning. Thank you for that. Sorry, I couldn't allow you to ask the questions, but there's a process that we have to go through.
Right. Yeah, I understand that.
Good, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Christine.
Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to come and submit. Obviously, there was a lot covered in our general submission, and I will only have a couple of points just to add here. I discovered, looking on the ICC site, that you have a policy called Significance and Engagement Policy, which was effective from the 9th of June last year. And it references back to the Local Government Act of 2002, which has principles of consultation. And those principles of consultation are that persons who have views on any matter that their local authority is undertaking should have reasonable opportunity to present those views in a manner that and format that is appropriate and preferences that suit the needs of the people who want to actually make a submission. And the views should be received by the local authority with an open mind and given due consideration. And persons who present views should have access to a clear record or description of the relevant decisions made by the local authority and explanatory material related to decisions. Now you have my submission. I have been a licensee since 2004, and our rates did increase, as we mentioned, along generally with the council's rates over the city until last year. And that was based on a valuation, a desktop valuation that was made by a valuer who valued our properties at freehold rates, and that was in 2020. And so the council and its workers and officers sat on that with no liaison with Coopers Creek residents. It passed through with the COVID lockdown and the one little line in last year's annual plan, as per Claire Hadley's instruction, that we should be charged market rates, which we have through a lot of the emails that have come backwards and forwards under the Freedom of Information Act. We obviously did not present last year to the annual plan because it was an unnamed, no value, just market rates. Things were ticking over. There was no correspondence with the council at all that we would get a 60% increase. We have this year been advised that we could come and we could do this process. But if you can see the blue on this little letter that we all received, there's a website there which has 95 characters, including 1 underscore, which is lost in the underlining of the website address. And that was to be our access. Or we could go to Let's Talk ICC, but of course we all tried that, or a number of us did, foolishly, because you missed the underscore. And the council could make it easier for people to come and actually have an impact and know what's going on by just applying for a tiny URL and you get something with 8 digits. And then you might get a little bit more proper feedback. But that was our letter. I appreciate that we were notified and we're here. There's a lot of angst, of course, because the new plan that you are looking at today is for it to be market increased again. We're still under dispute. We have had advice from the Ombudsman. He said to be declaring everything and to be doing as much as we can to come to an agreement. I'm not sure if you councillors are aware of some of the difficulty that it's been to actually speak with your officers. And as Richard said, we could have sat down and been over a cup of tea talking through issues. And in fact, some of the documents that we received from you say back in 1991, if my memory serves me, that there should have been a group set up to liaise with Coopers Creek residents. It was seconded by Thelma Buck, I think, proposed by someone else, and that was to do with the establishment of the Memorandum of Understanding, and that kind of conversation has not happened until we get to this wildly extravagant 60% increase. So I would just ask perhaps that we could have an opportunity, rather than us heading down through the law, that you would give us some time actually just to be able to have a conversation around a cup of tea. Excuse me for my glasses back on and off. Coopers Creek Historical Village is 3.5 hectares out of the whole domain area of 2,217 hectares. It's a historical site. We all value it. We appreciate it. We love it. It was there before Invercargill for 20 years or more. Supplied the city. It's a historic place. We do our best to look after it. We look after the animals, get rid of vermin, get rid of wild plants, especially we're a service to the people. We're the first place they come. And I'm open to any questions.
Thank you, Christine. So to proceed, there's concern around the consultative process.
Absolutely.
And also the process for valuation. If I've picked up correctly, you're saying that the comparison with the likes of Omaui is different because those freehold properties.
Yes, you own the land. It's public land. It's how can it be valued at a freehold rate?
Thank you. Councillors, any questions? If not, your concerns have been heard.
Do I have any more minutes?
You do.
I'd just like to bring up something that was written to the executive leadership team in December 2020, which gave the impression that Coopers Creek has only recently been permanently occupied. The permanent occupancy has gone back 50 years or more since the ranger was publicly noted, and all of that occupation has been acquiesced by the council through its officers. People have been encouraged to build and have had them inspected by the council, pass test. It's not a new thing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for taking the time to come along and submit. We appreciate that.
Thank you.
Brian and Kath.
Kia ora, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to come and address you today.
Please feel free to have a seat if you're more comfortable.
I'd like to stand just to say my bit and then I'll sit down. Thank you.
I'll just even say, if that's all right, thanks.
Yes.
I'd like to start by quoting from an email, an internal email here at ICC, which begins with an ICC admin person stating that they were keen to understand exactly what the lease and management plans state and what are our obligation for Coopers Creek. Can anyone please provide these to me? The response to that from another ICC management person was that these are non-conforming buildings as noted in the Sandy Point Management Plan. We have tried to phase them out in the past, but have met with both public and political opposition to the same. They pay very little in terms of rental. However, in recent years, Claire Hadley has requested a larger increase an annual rent, and we have made some significant increases. I think that it would be fair to say that at times there has been an historical tension between the council and the ICC, the ICC and the inhabitants at Coopers Creek, and I just refer to you some newspaper headlines over the years. So August 1990, Sandy Point plans come under fire. September 1990, new policy for Sandy Point cribs. May 1991, council backs down on crib rentals. And February 2013, council backs down on cribs policy. And to a more recent 2022 is not the time for larger rate increases. So at this point, I would just like to read our submission to you. You've probably all got a copy in front of you. A little bit of background. We have owned number 1 Coopers Creek since 2006. It is a special and unique place, and we spend as much time there as possible. We do not own the land our home is built on, and no services are provided to us. We use a public road to access our property. We pay an annual licence to occupy fee, the cost of which has historically recognised the absence of services. The fee normally incurs a small annual increase. Last year, the licence to occupy fee increased by 60%, from $815 to $1,300. This was a massive increase which we were not informed of, nor were we invited to take part in any discussion or give feedback to council prior to the 60% increase being imposed on us. We were informed our crib was to come into line with market rates on advice to the council based on a desktop valuation of our property by a property valuer. We ask, how is it possible to compare our crib fees to freehold rates and rentals on properties that have some or all of the usual urban services, i.e. water, electricity, rubbish, sewage, transport, roading, footpaths, street lighting, etc., etc. We felt pressure to pay the huge increased fee or fear the possibility of being ordered from our crib by the council. We do not agree to a further increase at this time. We are in the process of challenging the fee increase for the 21-22 period and believe a further increase at this stage would be unfair and unjustified until such times as outstanding matters are resolved regarding crib fees. We also have very strong concerns regarding the rigid conditions of our licence to occupy. And I'll just give you 2 of what I consider to be rather draconian pieces of that licence to occupy. One is that the licensee shall have no right to a renewal of this licence, and that's when the council has acquiesced over 40 years to people living at Coopers Creek. And the other is that the failure to comply with the rules and regulations entitles the licensor, i.e. the council, to terminate the licence with 1 month's notice, and any buildings will forfeit to the licensor. And there are several other parts of the licence that are along that same vein. So that's about what I want to say. Brian?
Yeah, just finishing off what Kev said there, the status that we're living under is really a third world status. I don't think anywhere else in New Zealand, so like people that rent properties are under the tenancy tribunal and got a lot of protection. We've got nothing, so that's why we've got to fight hard for our case. Just want to clarify one thing there too. Just with the rate increases, and that I'll just go back just so that you know in figures. So like in 2018, it went up 1%. 2019 went up 2%. 2020, 5%. In 2021, 60%. We have got no problems of it mirroring what the rate increases have been in Invercargill, and that's what has happened with our increases all the time. And we have not got a problem with that whatsoever. Everyone's quite happy with that. But when this major increase comes in with a very fluid way of doing it, it's based on, I believe, 1 hectare is where they get that valuation from. And like it's been sent by other speakers, it's based on freehold ground. If you put a house on a freehold or any building on a freehold section, you move that house or building onto a license to occupy and the valuation of that falls dramatically. So we have got, as far as people living there to try to get capital gain, there's none. There's none whatsoever. And also, I just noticed with the process that we've been going through in consultation, I've noticed we've been dealing with a number of people that have come in out of the area into Southland. I'd like to request them, you know, when you're making decisions, please take into consideration our history, our culture, our heritage, because that all applies to Coopers Creek, like other places like Cozy Nook, Blue Cliffs, Measley Beach. They're there, they're part of our culture, and people want them to stay there. I just want to clarify too, Ellen, just with the, you said about damage done out at Coopers Creek, or not so much Coopers Creek, in the Sandy Point area with, I'll define them as non-conforming four-wheel drive. Now, a lot of it's done at 12 o'clock at night. We can't do anything about it whatsoever. The whole area out there has been ripped up, particularly last winter. Just to note, there used to be a ranger out there. The ranger's gone, the house is gone, only about 400 metres from where the ranger's house is. The soccer field car park got absolutely ripped up. Now, it's like one of the previous speakers said, when we had a ranger out there living there, we could bring them anytime, even when they're off duty. They would deal with the matter. It's a lot harder to do that now. It is a concern. We can't do anything at 12 o'clock at night when there's several cars doing this type of damage. But it's like other speakers have said, I think the people that are involved with Coopers Creek are picked by the creek to be there. Yeah, we take care of the area. Rubbish is picked up, but like I said, there's been several fires put out. There's one local resident, he has trapped over 500 rats, rabbits, you name it, cats that have been lost there. We didn't bring them there. They're getting dropped or breeding out there in the area. So we do play a part as a community out there in what we do. I think that's very important to take that into consideration. I think that's about all, because a lot of it's been covered by other speakers anyway. So thanking you for your time.
Thank you. We're almost at time. Councillor Pottinger, you a question?
Yeah, thank you. Look, the fees and charges are coming to us in June for deliberation, okay? That's in the annual plan. My question is regarding the MOU. Do you think this current MOU that was drawn up in 1990 is fit for purpose, or would you like it more relevant? Some of the language is...
I think it's okay. I think a question, not a question, something needs to be ratified here. Kath read out 2 points here before. I don't know if you can remember them. about the license to occupy. We used to be able to, it was just rolled over from year to year. If people want to leave there, I'll sell the place and get out, type of thing. And that comes, what happens with those type of properties is often people have bought it, they may be a distance away, then find they can't go to the property and spend much time there, and it only lands up a few times a year. So they'll end up selling them. And this is something with putting this in, now this is the newer, the latest license to occupy. It wasn't in the previous ones.
So that's a separate document, the license to operate.
Can I just answer your question for me, Councillor Pottinger? I think the Memorandum of Understanding has been historically a document that recognises our obligations to the council as people that live in the area, and the council's rules and regulations about that. I personally would be very open to sitting down with councillors and drawing up a new Memorandum of Understanding, but one that recognised us as a community. Some of us have been there for years and years, and as Richard said, Māori have occupied that place for hundreds of years. So there's always been people at Cooper's Creek, and as I referred right at the beginning, there's at times been an uneasy tension between council and residents. Personally, I would like to see something robust and solid that supports us continuing to live there, and recognises just and fair rules about that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any further questions? If not, thank you for taking the time to come along and speak to your submission. We do appreciate it.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councillors, I've been advised that one of the other Coopers Creek submitters wishes to speak, but I also note that we're scheduled for a break some time ago, and in the interests of comfort, I'm going to adjourn for 15 minutes, and because we had one submitter drop off at the end, we can add the other resident.
With my submission, I only address the immediate things, but there's a couple of things that come out on the side.
Yep, so we're looking to accommodate you, but it won't be straight away when we come back. It'll be just towards the end. There aren't too many other submitters to go. Thanks, councillors. We are adjourned.
Yeah.
We will reconvene our extraordinary performance policy and partnerships committee meeting as we continue to hear submissions on our annual plan. Next submitter is Sue Smith. Coming up and take a seat, Sue. Feel free to take your mask off while you're submitting.
Yeah, it gets a bit foggy. Sorry, I was expecting to stand.
If you're more comfortable, Sue, you can.
Good morning, Sir Tim, our Mayor, CEO and City Councillors. I appreciate the time to be able to speak. In my submission, annual plan, the proposed rates increase of 7.78%, nearly 8%, is unacceptable, unsustainable and totally unrealistic in this current economic climate of nearly 8% inflation and rising fuel costs. To those of us in the real world on a single income. Solution, a lot more efficient management of finance, time and resources and staff. Focus to fix what is necessary and urgent, not what isn't. I'd just like to expand on that. Reality check. When receiving $360,000 a year or you have 2 to 3 incomes per household, there is no consideration for those of us living in the real world working hard on a single minimum wage through no fault of our own, with the cost of living, as mentioned, also up nearly 8%. Single parents, pensioners, young families are really struggling. There is no bought coffees, dinners or discretionary spending in my budget. Last year's rate increase of $160 was hard enough. It is unacceptable and not affordable to hit the ratepayer again. Solution, cut back costs and rein in spending. To survive in the real world, this is a way of life, a must do. I challenge the ICC to do likewise. Prioritise what is urgent, important with infrastructure. Number 1, streetscape. Save 2 to 3 million. Why develop beyond Kelvin Street where there are car parks when you want it to be pedestrian friendly? Communications team. For the size of Invercargill, 5 would do instead of 9 or 10. Why are we paying for communication specialists to come in, plus all the consultants, legal opinions, and chairmen of numerous committees? How can the civic administration building go from 14 million to 28 million in such a short period of time? Why would you upgrade now when there is a supply shortage resulting in a 20% plus increase for all the materials that are needed? Steel is up 40% in itself. Why would you upgrade when you don't know what the future of the city councils are in New Zealand? In Southland, it could go from 3 to 1 city council. Accountability to the ratepayer instead of punishing them with ongoing costs would be appreciated. How? ICC has got reserves in cash investments, 50 mil in local banks, 37 mil in properties, example Don Street, reserves and vacant land you don't need. If these 20 to 25 properties were fast-tracked to be sold, ICC could well afford a 0 increase to the ratepayer, which, given the current economic climate and inflation rate, is a more rational and realistic option. Why can't I and others afford to keep our own homes that we have worked so hard for when ICC have enough assets to cover their costs? The rate increase will push up rentals, which are already unaffordable. Does the ICC need more homeless people in Invercargill? Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Councillors, it's open for questions. So if the rate of inflation is currently at around 8% and the proposed rate increase on average just a little bit below that, if your suggestion is we should try and not match with the rate of inflation, what services do you think council could cut or reduce?
No, my answer to that is not reducing essential services, but using the assets you have, as I spoke of. You have more than enough to cover that cost without it being passed on to the ratepayer.
So of the reserves assets that you referred to in your spoken submission, do you understand that a high proportion of those reserves are committed to specific purposes?
What proportion? Well, what proportion are you talking about?
Sorry, the questions are one way, but I will say that Councillor Soper led 3 or 4 years ago a review of all the reserves to make sure that there weren't funds being stored unnecessarily that couldn't be put to use. So some of the reserves are for properties, for example, or reserves set aside to cover off depreciation, which is an accounting requirement. So that's where a substantial amount of them sit. However, that's getting beyond me asking a question. That wasn't. Councillor Soper.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mrs. Smith, I'm just interested. A previous submitter referred to the rates rebate scheme not being well known. In light of your submission, do you think the rates rebate scheme is well enough advertised to the people of Invercargill?
Possibly, but still, it's a once a year reduction. So if you're paying quarterly, it's 1 quarter out. You still have to pay the other 3. So for many of us, it's still a struggle to do that on any rates increase.
My understanding is it was spread across the entire rates bill. But
Yeah.
Well, that's not how it works.
other questions, councillors? If not, Sue, thank you very much for, first of all, taking the time to make your submission, but also for coming along and sitting in front of council to present it. We appreciate that it's not an easy thing to do, and it's a kind of fierce theatre. So thank you very much for that.
I appreciate that, thank you. Just in reference to your question, I'd just like to say with reserves that I'm sure that there can be, I'd be interested to know more detail about the 20 to 25 properties that could be fast-tracked and sold to keep rates increased down.
I think we went through a process that started that last week from memory, so it is underway. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now a rather unique situation. Councillor Clark, on behalf of the Invercargill Ratepayers Advocacy Group, thank you for sitting there through this morning, and we hand over to you now for your presentation.
Thank you, Chair. Just for those who don't know, I'm Chair of the local Ratepayers Group. We've already put in quite a lengthy submission, so I won't read through that, but that's not appropriate. But just to reflect that there are 4 parts to our submission. One is our view on how the City Council can fund its rate increases beyond the 4% that it forecast 9 months ago in the long-term plan, so that extra 3.7%. 2, how rate increases impact on the vulnerable in our community, and you heard Sue and others have talked about that as well. And with the inflationary impacts that we've got just more recently, that group of vulnerability has increased. Thirdly, the impacts of compounding rates. And so 4% this year doesn't mean 4% next year, it means 4 on 4. And then there's a reflection of Mary's story, which is really a reflection, a personal reflection on how hard it is for some people. So I'll take those as being read. Our group is not wanting to comment on the museum in the long-term plan as such, other than to say that we support the views of others that have spoken today around the need to display tuatara and the retaining of the pyramid shape. Our view is that the museum inappropriately dominated the annual plan exercise, and some of the information in there is clearly not accurate. So we just put that to a side. Our main concern is the proposed increase of 7.7%, which is in effect roughly about $2.5 million extra required over and above the 4% forecast earlier in the year. In early March this year, ICC gave an undertaking to have an open workshop to identify what levers were available to reduce the expenditure for the forthcoming year, or to increase the income for that period, or to do both. That workshop has not occurred yet. Ratepayers are fed up with rate increases that seem to occur as the first option in this exercise, without acknowledging that council has looked at alternative options that are available to them. Those options should routinely include use of cash reserves, and I heard the comments by the chair about the reserves, and I'll just reflect that the advice that I've been given by the current finance group manager and the previous one is that those cash reserves are not significantly locked in. They are available to us. Increasing borrowing is another option. Sale of property assets, sale of surplus parks and reserve land, reducing expenditure, especially around Three Waters renewals and around personnel costs. Delay or reduce project scopes is an option, and I heard one of them talk about the reduction in stage 2 of streetscapes, which we support. Or alternatively, run an unbalanced budget, which for those zooming in or listening today, an unbalanced budget means that you start off with an income stream which is less than what you're forecasting your expenditure to be. And in light of that, I just draw members' attention to Section 100 of the Local Government Act, which talks about the need to have a balanced budget, but then in Section 2 does allow for councils to run an unbalanced budget so long as they meet one of 5 criteria, and I would see that we would do that. The advice that we've got back from Local Government New Zealand and from Mike Reid, who is the Principal Policy Advisor at Local Government New Zealand, is that it is not uncommon for councils to successfully resolve to run an unbalanced budget. And what that does is it doesn't get into forecasting of what the cost would be and what the income would be. It allows an unbalanced budget, allows council to work through the year and see whether it can make savings as it works its way through. One of the issues, I guess, that we come up against in these constant increases to rates is the issue of what projects are costing us, which is not our routine business. It's not talking about cutting services, but it's the projects that impact into annual plans and into long-term plans. It's been the observation of our group that council staff often present forecast costs for projects to elected members, who then support those projects. Then within a short period of time, those costs tend to escalate anywhere between 50 and 200%. So that, by our group, that is an unacceptable way to commit ratepayers' rates and needs more appropriate governance. Since the beginning of this term in 2019, our group has monitored this issue on 10 projects, and that doesn't include Anderson House because we don't have the final costs for that project, but we've monitored and watched the Invercargill Central Limited, which is the big mall that's going up. We've watched streetscape stages 1 and 2, the Branksholme upgrade, the Civic Administration building upgrade, the projection for the water tower, Rugby Park, 66D Street demolition, the Lower S Street sale, the Invercargill Central Limited cultural narrative, and the Bluff boat ramp. So in that period of 2.5 years, the original forecasted costs have escalated by an eye-watering $78.35 million. And I just don't know how we run a business with those sort of escalating costs. And so that undermines the confidence of ratepayers that they're getting value for their bucks when they either approve or accept a long-term plan and then accept annual plans within that. So it's our view that council should not go beyond the 4% rate increase that it's originally had in the long-term plan, which came into effect just a short period ago, in fact 9 months ago. We believe that the extra 3.7% should be dealt with internally by council, not by way of a rate increase. And our preference is for an unbalanced budget to operate so that council staff can work their way through the year. The extra money that's required, the 2.5, would only be required in month 12, which is June next year, when technically we could run out of money and would have to subsidise any shortfall. That's the impact of the unbalanced budget. The other way, of course, in our view, is to claw back stage 2 of streetscape. And I think you heard Sue, the previous speaker, talk to that. Our view is that, that when we have escalating costs, sometimes we have to cut our cloth accordingly. I struggle, I guess, with the stage 2 development for the streetscape that goes beyond Kelvin Street on what we refer to the east side of S Street. That extension has cost us millions of dollars, and for a project that's emphasised by having pedestrian focus, I can't see why we would develop a street that has 2 large car parks in it, because by nature they develop cars into the area. So there are our 2 preferences. We recommend to council that they stick within the 4% and find other ways to manage the other areas. And our last reflection is that if you go into any of the media at the moment, you'll see the massive increases that are coming through food bills, fuel bills, power bills, and increasing rents. And what started off 6 to 9 months ago with people on fixed incomes, people on single incomes, people on temporary work or casual work were the ones suffering. We've now got a significant amount of people in the working middle class that are also struggling with this. And we don't believe that we should add any more to inflationary costs than what we forecast to do 9 months ago. So thank you for that.
Thanks, Nobby. Can I ask if the advocacy group, if your preference is for that unbalanced budget,
Sure.
What do you see as the option for the following year?
Yep, can talk to that. It's been my observation, now our group's observation, that councils are often quite, I shouldn't say lax, but they tend to be quite generous in their forecasting of an annual budget. And most years we run at a surplus, not always. Some it's often just 100,000 or 2, but in some periods it's been a couple of $1 million. And so the risk of running an unbalanced budget, I guess, is that if you run short, you have to top it up, I guess, in the 12th month. And so that would have to come out of one of those investment accounts, which sometimes is referred to as a reserve accounts. That doesn't affect the following year. If we put a balanced budget in now, and we put in the full 7.7%, the chances are realistically that at the end of the year, we'll be taking some of that money that could be surplus, and we could be putting it into reserves again, because that's where reserves have come from. They've come from surpluses over a long period of time. And so I think the alternative to that is to run an unbalanced budget, which means that we see how things go during the year and make some decisions as we get to months 9, 10, 11 or 12.
Thank you. Councillor Pottinger.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Nobby, for that. Look, page 4 of the annual plan document, it states we've got an increase in capital. This is for the forecast in the LTP 22 to 23. The forecast for capital expenditure was 45.4 million. That is now forecast for that year 72.6 million. The forecast for operational expenditure 110.9, now forecast at 115.9. Now, my question to you, Nobby, is that do you think after 1 year the current long-term plan is now not relevant and is actually too ambitious? And instead of applying effectively band-aids like short-term rates increases for this annual plan, should we actually be revisiting the big picture of the LTP, and that the actual current model of the LTP is not affordable moving forward? It's just, it's you know, like, I mean, you look at those increases I've just shown you now. Do you think we need to start again?
I think truly we do, and for two reasons. One is the escalating costs that I referred to, 78.35 million up in 2.5 years, and it continues to grow. I don't have any confidence that where we're at the moment will be the end product. So we need to go back to square one. The other issue is we've got a significant amount of, I guess, structural work to go on, and so that structural work would be around the storage facility and the museum itself. And as much as I've been a very, very strong advocate for getting it done quickly, the downside of it is it's becoming more unaffordable. And that's not through apathy on our behalf. Brad Olson yesterday in the Zone 5-6 thing said the lack of manpower in the construction industry is going to mean a lot of councils will not be able to get their long-term plan work done, because people are not going to exit out of Auckland, where there's a lot of work going on, to come to Invercargill just to build a building and then go back. And so I think the landscape has significantly changed in the last 18 months for us, and I do think we need to revisit, and we need to recalculate the true cost of some of these. And if that's the case, we will push some things out. I think just about every submitter you've heard today has said their number one priority is the museum. And if the cost is that we subsequently don't do a whole lot of other stuff, so be it. My personal preference is we are too far into the block to do any changing there. Branksholme is actually the number one priority for me, because it's the sole source of water for the city, so we can't afford to not do the upgrade there. And if you went to a museum at some later stage, that would be fine. The other projects, unfortunately, just need to drift away. So, yeah, I agree with the position you had there.
Thanks, Nobby.
Thank you. Councillors, any other questions? We're almost at time. Councillor Crackett.
Thank you, Councillor Ludlow. Just a question to Nobby about the revisitation of the LTP and annual plan, as you've just stated. Do you think that that would be possible within the current timeframes that we have to be working to?
Probably not. And I guess the alternative is that we go ahead with what we're currently into, and we'll end up, as we work through the long-term plan, defaulting on some things that we would like to get done. For argument's sake, just to give you an example, we've got a very, very tight time frame on the museum storage area at Tisbury. I don't think we'll get there. We won't get there from changing the reserve criteria, and so that will stall off the museum. And even if we do get things done from the regulatory position, I think we won't get the manpower in the city to physically do that building. It will delay out. So by nature, I think our aspirations under the long-term plan will get pushed out. We'll end up with delayed timeframes. So I think it was really interesting that I heard Jeff Thompson say this morning to a response to Rangi. He said, it's not about the money. I'll just get it done as quickly as I can. And sometimes that doesn't sound all that professional, but I think if you've got a priority that you're stepping your way through and you don't step through those projects as quickly as you can, so be it.
So ultimately, focus, Councillor Clark, would be on reprioritisation.
I think we've got the priorities right in the long-term plan. I just don't think that we'll be able to deliver them on time. And I think that's something we need to acknowledge, because otherwise we'll be criticised, including from our group, that here's another long-term plan that council doesn't deliver on time. I don't think it's the availability of funding. I think that's it's the availability of the construction resources. Brad Olson was quite clear about that yesterday. Everybody's struggling. All the councils have got work they'd like to do, but they physically can't get the companies to do it.
Thanks, councillors. Thanks, Nobby. We appreciate the submission from the Ratepayers Advocacy Group. Councillors, that brings us on to the submission from Kate and Alan Hayes.
All right.
Right. Well, I didn't expect such a full audience today. I'm a little bit taken aback by it. First of all, I must say, forgive the English accent. I'm 2/3 Kiwi and only 1/3 English. I came here in 1971, but I can't get rid of the accent. You must also forgive some of the nerdish references I give to etymology this morning, too. It's all to do with culture. I've heard a lot this morning, even though I've just been sitting there for a short time, about money, so I could sympathise with that. But I also sympathise with culture as well. And rightly or wrongly, New Zealand has two cultures, and both should be equal. I say that because I can remember a few years ago during Maori Language Week, they were interviewing people about its validity. And everybody was agreeing it was a good idea, and I was too. And then they interviewed a woman in Auckland who said, "Oh, I'm English, I've got no culture." I thought, you stupid woman. But, you know, we do have culture. If you look at the Scottish culture around the city, the name of the streets and so on, it's all something to be proud of as well. I mentioned about being nerdish about etymology. One of the words I'm going to refer to is icon, and that comes from a Greek word, akon, ikonos, a neuter noun. Don't I sound like a nerd? Which means literally just image. And the other word that I'll mention is just the word museum. Language is culture. Why is it a museum? Well, the Greek god Zeus had 9 affairs, shall we say, with Memniosi, and their children were the muses, and they were the inspiration for song, dance, memory, poetry, and so on. So that's why we call a museum a museum. But referring back to that icon, image, if you think about it, anyone who lives here, and even the people who come down here visiting, like our children, who 2 of whom have gone to Auckland, silly people, you close your eyes and what do you think of if you've been here for some time? I think of the water tower. It's an icon. It's part of the heritage. I think of the war memorials. I think of the bank corner. I think of the neoclassical architecture down D Street and along Esk Street and so on. I also think of the pictures. The side of the Kelvin Hotel, a very modern picture, very nice, right, lovely. The Scottish Hall over the road with the knight and his sword and so on. Culture. More recently, I'm thinking of the umbrella that has been moved and the facade on Esk Street and the way St. John's has been preserved in the new building. It's all part of keeping culture, I think. The most important thing for me regarding the Gala Street Museum is that it definitely is iconic, inside and out. It's very recent, right? But if you think about it, it's certainly noticeable. And from a visitor and a local point of view, the parking is easy. And it's got a very innovative interior as well. some of the museums you go in, large vaulted ceilings, you feel quite agoraphobic when you're inside. But in the Gala Street Museum, you were close to the exhibits. You were close to the culture that was there. It's also close to the park, so it's very good for visitors. It's somewhere to take visitors as well. And they're keen to go there because partly the Tuatarium, but also the museum itself. We've had a few visitors come and stay with us, but getting them into town, into what's there, I know it's only temporary, that's been difficult. And the reason, well, one of the reasons I'd like to keep the Gala Street Museum as it is it's a pyramid. And again, I'm going to sound very boring here, but again, this is part of our culture, whether you like it or not. We have an alphabet. And I can remember watching a program about the story of the alphabet. And originally, it came from Egypt, would you believe? They're hieroglyphics, which means holy writing. There we are, being a nerd again. The alphabet itself, there were pictures of animals, but the sound went, and just the first letter of the sound of the animal was used. And he went right through to Aleph, which is Arabic for a cow, an ox, call it whatever you like, a bull. And then he showed on the program how it moved to Phoenicia, and then to Greece, and then to Rome. So for me, probably nobody else in Invercargill, but for me anyway, just seeing the pyramid reminds me of the Egyptian heritage of the alphabet itself, which is a fascinating study. I hope I haven't sounded too nerdish, and I think I've done it in 5 minutes, speaking a little bit quicker than I usually do.
Thank you very much. A little longer than 5. It may interest you to know, just before I open it for questions, that whilst many people recognise the pyramid as being Egyptian, it's actually the shape of a traditional Māori whare.
Yeah, well, there we are. Cultures together.
So, councillors, it's open for questions.
I won't be nerdish with my answer, I promise.
I didn't find you nerdish with your presentation, to be honest. There are none. I guess that's a symptom of concise communication and engaging and interesting as well. So thank you very much for that, and thank you for taking the time to not only make it but to come and sit in front of us this morning. We appreciate that.
Oh, it was a pleasure. Keep that museum.
Thank you.
Do you want to say anything?
Shall I start? Okay. Right. Well, we used to live here in the 70s and 80s, and then we went to the North Island. And when we came back for holidays, we were delighted to see the pyramid because we thought this was great. And I have got a question. Which part is earthquake unsafe? Is it the inside or the actual pyramid outside?
Questions aren't really part of this, but I will tell you it's inside. There are several buildings underneath
So it's the
that
inside
shop.
bit that's earthquake unsafe.
The pyramid itself is a fire risk.
Yes. Right, well, I'd like to talk about the Kelvin Street Museum. Te waka tuia. I've made multiple visits, and it's very average, and there are just not enough displays, and it's often empty of visitors. And before my grandchildren were flying down from Auckland, I went to visit it, and I thought, well, it hasn't got enough for children. It's not enough to interest a child in here. And so I think that was a waste of ratepayers' money. I think that that money shouldn't have been spent on that, because I go in there quite often, and it's usually empty. There's just nothing going on in there. It's got a few interesting things, but it's not worth the money. So we need some indoor activities for visitors. Anderson's Park's closed. Bill Richardson's Transport World is very good, but it is expensive. It's worth the money, but it's expensive. When we take our grandchildren, when our grandchildren visit, we take them to Transport World. Motorcycle Mecca, dig this, that's great, but it is expensive. And once you take the children, that's it. And so now when they come to visit, we haven't got anywhere to take them that's indoors. So we're pretty desperate. And I think that the pyramid should be restored because I think it looks great. Yeah, that's all I have to say.
I would just finish off with one comment. You were talking about it being a fire risk. Its actual name is to do with the Greek word for fire, pyre. And when you light a broad fire, it goes up to 1 point. So that's why a pyramid is called a pyramid. Aren't I a nerd?
Let's hope we don't see it on fire. Thank you for your submission. Ella, joining us by Zoom this time. I'll just give you a chance to switch back on. Unless she's been called away. Oh, there you go, Ella. Welcome back. Sorry that we're running a little bit behind time.
No worries. Thanks for having me along today and to give me the opportunity to present via conference. So I'll take my submission as read and just wanted to highlight 2 points. So I do support the preferred option for the new building for the museum, and just however only if a couple of additional I guess actions are carried out with that project. So just briefly to introduce myself, I have a PhD in architecture and specifically focusing on sustainable urban design and urban lifestyles. So that's across the environmental, social and economic systems. And I've taught sustainable business practices at the Otago MBA program for a number of years. So I have a real interest in obviously sustainability, but in particular with this project for the museum around green building and the opportunity that Invercargill has to become a showcase for not only our within the region, but also within the country and potentially even internationally. So I guess I understand that the documentation that you provided can only go to a certain amount of detail, but had hoped to see, I guess, a little more of the aspiration of what a leadership type building could actually look like, and a bit more of the detail around that. So the critical success factors are great. I guess following on from the points that Nobby Clark was making, actually, I am very aware of what happens in these sorts of projects around budget and the potential impact of escalating costs. And ultimately what often happens there is that these sorts of aspirations for green or you know, innovative or providing some sort of leadership often do not make it, and they fall off as being less important than just getting the building built. So I'd really like to emphasize that I do support the preferred option, but only if some of those critical success factors are being integrated into the project early on and are made true in the ultimate outcome of that project. So some ways of doing that, I think, just on my 4th point in my submission, is in particular to join up to something like the Green Building Council and their Green Star rating program, and to get an advisor on board who is going to ensure that these sorts of principles are integrated into the project and that becomes part of your aspirational vision for the project. I do fear that if not, then that aspect of the project isn't going to make it. Sorry if that is already, it'd be great if that's already happening. It wasn't a part of the detail that's already in the documentation. I couldn't find it anywhere in any of the other backgrounds. So I'd love to hear if there's already some action in that. And just furthermore to the second point on my list, a number of the examples for the exhibitions that are going to be held within the new museum are very much focused on the past for Murihuku. I would love to see more of those exhibitions to be focused on also the challenges and opportunities for the future of our region and our city. There's some considerable environmental challenges that need some community discussion, they need understanding, they need education, and these are the roles of the museum. And it would be a real asset to the community to be able to have a place that can delve into more of the science aspects of these sorts of issues. I do note that Environment Southland is part of the partnership, or had been in the past, part of the partnership of the building. So to bring them through to the actual exhibits to work on how that citizen science aspect and science communication can be used to help our communities better understand. So I'll leave it for that. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Ella. When you talk about green building and sustainability, are the financial benefits that come from that something that's realised more long term, or is it just quite often perceived as an additional cost at the outset?
Yeah, great question. So there's been some really good case studies globally, but also within New Zealand now on the sort of payback period for these buildings, and also other benefits, in particular social. So just the way that the buildings are designed, how they encourage work for the staff. You get a lot more benefit of, I guess, happy staff and happy outcomes. In terms of the actual payback, it's a difficult one because it's often over a very long time period, but councils are really well positioned for that because they own the buildings. Unfortunately, often the accounting processes we use for our buildings don't always clearly articulate the value. So, for example, very efficient energy systems, the payback could be over 10 years, for example, and they don't always, I guess, there's some intelligence in the accounting for that, but certainly sustainability is much more of a long-term future perspective.
Okay, thanks, Ella. We're just having a few buffering issues at the moment, so I waffle for long enough, it might catch up. But Councillor Pottinger, you had a question.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Hi, Ella. It's Ian here. And I will respect your answer on this, being a PhD in architecture. Now, we've had quite a bit of talk about retaining the shape of the pyramid. Now, if we were wanting to free up as much resources and money as possible to be able to do the green, sustainable building and put the money into that, is building a pyramid a practical design from being an architect to achieve what we want to do? Or are we sacrificing appearance over practicality?
Great to me. Unfortunately, not one that I can say I'm a professional hand. Unfortunately, as I mentioned, my PhD in architecture is specifically around urban form rather than building design. So I think there is break in the building documents and so it's in that space. I think what you find with something like the pyramid is that you don't have it. You make it too hot in the summer and too cold in the winter. It's often got a lot of butter, but
Ella, can I interrupt for just a second and ask you to turn your camera off? We're just having some buffering issues, and I think that if you turn your camera off, that might be of some assistance. Sorry to interrupt. Carry on, please.
I'd finish with that particular question. It's a very good question, but not one that I'm able to answer.
Thank you.
Right.
That's made a difference as well, so thank you for that. Councillors, are there any other questions for Ella? If not, we appreciate your input, both professional and personal. It's a great detailed submission, and thanks for joining us on Zoom to speak to it.
Thanks for the opportunity. Best of luck.
Thanks, Ella.
Thanks.
Donald, welcome along. Come and take a seat. For those speaking, feel free to take your mask off. If you can just make sure that you've got a microphone in front of you at the time. Donald, I'll leave you to introduce your team and take us through your presentation.
Thank you. On behalf of the Mountain Bike Club, I have Kat McLaughlin and Marcus Roy. Our submission has asked for monies be brought forward or made available for a development of a car park at the bottom of Bluff Hill off Pierce Street. We're doing working on a major development for trail building and walking tracks on the hill to get people active on the hill, to be able to create a environment for recreational and national events. With the car park we have at the present time, we've got enough for 8 cars, which creates safety issues. We have no toilets. There are no toilets on the hill. People defecate on the hill, at the top of the hill, and it's disgusting. It's not nice, and we'd like to get, and part of our development is a toilet block in the car park. Apart from the safety issues, we need cars off the road. We need kids off the road. Our membership as a club has grown in 2 years from 148 members to 469, and just continually growing every month. So it's getting well used, Bluff, and it's a destination town. We've been working with the Awarua Runanga and with BMET on rejuvenating the hill so that the wilding pines have been cut down. We're helping them with the replanting, with developing the hill back to its natural state. With the car park, there's other events that happen in Bluff. We know about Barrett Munro, Yunker Junior Tour of Southland. All these vehicles arrive in Bluff. They've got nowhere to go. They go to the top of the hill. They park on the side of the road. They just create a nightmare for event organisers. So with the car park, we just see this as helping lots of events. We've got coming up in October this year the National Secondary School Mountain Bike Champs, of which we're expecting in excess of 1,000 entrants from all over the country, and would really need a car park and would really like to have the car park functional for there as a start race village for us, in conjunction with the Oyster Festival village at the bottom of the hill. So we really want to drive the Bluff, rejuvenate Bluff, help Bluff, and with that, it's part of our development. That's our car park concept plans, pump track for kids, and more trails on the hill. But we're really struggling with the car park we've got for events, and we'd like to see if we can get that brought forward to help us.
Can you touch on the possibility of how that site can be developed to potentially compete alongside the likes of what exists in Queenstown or Rotorua?
Yes, at the moment, we need to have more trails, and we need to have more accessible trails, and we need to have parking for people that do come. At the moment, there's a lot of people do come down, and they park pretty much wherever they can on the sides of the streets. So what we want to do is we have a full development plan. We want to build new trails, family-friendly trails, along with more technical trails to attract people. And some of those trails that we want to do towards our neighbours, which are Ocean Beach, is to put walking trails, so they're dual-use trails.
Thank you.
Just
Yeah,
for
Brett?
the councillor, although just speaking to that as well, Queenstown and Rotorua are national and international destinations that are renowned for attracting high volumes of tourists from all over the country and all over the world, particularly being in the Southern Hemisphere when it's winter time. In the Northern Hemisphere, a lot of international riders do come south looking for summertime worth of riding, and we see creating Bluff into a mountain bike destination. It would be a national destination, and also close proximity to Queenstown to also attract competitors and recreational riders from outside of Southland, and also creates an opportunity for the kids in Bluff to develop skills and connect with the area. And I guess just want to say big thanks to the Parks and Recreation team, Steve, Carolyn, Kate, Jeremy, Leslie have all been really supportive of this work to date, and can't speak highly enough of their support for the club.
Cool. Thanks for the feedback. Bex, then Councillor Pottinger.
Thanks. Just wondering, when are the finances for this project predicted to be in the long-term plan? I'm assuming if you're asking for them to be brought forward, and does what you're planning align with the Bluff Tourism Master Plan that the council supports?
So the funds were identified in the 23-24 financial year, I believe, and we're seeking then those funds be brought forward to 22-23 at the latest, ideally sooner rather than later. But I guess once we start up the procurement process and get underway with contracts and bits and pieces, we'll be ready to go as soon as we can. In terms of the Bluff mountain bike development plan, it was one of the key things with the Bluff master plan. It was the most highly submitted on action. It was the recreational precinct, so that got the most submissions out of any of the 10 precincts that were proposed in the Bluff Tourism Master Plan.
Thanks. When you're answering, if you could just remember to get in front of a microphone. Councillor Pottinger.
Thank you, Chair. Hey, Donald. Hey, right, so basically, Sandy Point, reasonable sized car park?
Yes.
Out there?
Yes.
Toilet?
Yes.
So you just want that at the bottom of Pier Street there?
Yes.
Right, thanks. Thank you.
Councillor Skelt.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Thanks, team. I'm really interested in the event creation you've talked about, in the sense of obviously in the benefit to the city, but and noting there's a change in sport and activity, obviously from traditional to obviously we'll call this extreme sport, for want of a better word, mountain biking. But you've had a growth of 148 to 469. I'm really interested in the sense of how many parks you actually would need for the event creation that you're talking about going forward, because I think that's critical. And if someone's done some work on that, that'll be interesting to hear. And also the demographic of currently the mountain bike people, is that demographic from the very young right through to the older, or is it a specific target market in the sense of who's actually doing the mountain biking?
To assist, could you want to define older?
Well, I'm not old, through you, Chair. So, no, I would just like to get a broad spectrum if someone could.
Donald, good luck.
And predictions for the future with the sport.
Our riders range from that ride down in Bluff anywhere from 5 to, we would have some that would be in their 70s. Some of the trails, especially the downhill, was more for the teenage 20, 30-year-old type game person, not me. But there's plenty of what we need to build there, and what our aim is to build more family-friendly trails. We had our first race in at Sandy Point in the weekend. We had 114 entrants. Of that, 3/4 of them was a mixture of children and female. So we have more and more ladies that ride down on Bluff. It's a wide demographic of people. It's not just young people. Surprises. Marcus and Kat are often riding Bluff. So it's a wide demographic of our club, and our club doesn't represent the numbers of people that ride our trails by a long shot.
So basically just the number of extra car parks you would be looking for?
We really need, what we're after is about 40 more car parks than what we've got. And by allowing that too, for events, we can have that as a race village. So we've got people that can congregate and put their set up for races on the car park and in that car park space.
And just to finish the questioning, the standard of car park that you'll be chasing, in the sense of, because there's different variations of car parks, obviously, what's your expectation around the finished product, as in the parks themselves? To what standard?
We would like a sealed car park, a chip sealed car park, just because of maintenance. We don't want maintenance costs with our trail developments, and with the way we're running the club. As we're trying to go away from having to maintain, we'd like to build something once and have it done right, and then we aren't reliant so much on our volunteer base for maintenance.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions, councillors? Reverend Cook.
Kia ora, Mr. Chair. I just trying to ascertain something. You said just recently that it's not just members of your club that are using the trails. So I have a question over the conforming to the trails bit of mountain biking on the hill, because I know it's a concern, and I know it's a concern in other places, that once you establish trails, then that's not enough for people. They want to go off and off and off. And given how much effort BMET and those are putting into the hill, the risk that might entail, how does your club manage that? Or how does it get managed, I would say? Not how does your club manage it, but how is it managed?
That's a good question, because we've been talking to BMET about that. We have a plan, and we have an MOU with the council, and we do track audits regularly on our trails, and the way we pick them up is we see those what they call ghost trails, and we generally can find out who's been doing them. We block them off straight off so that they can't be ridden, and that's just by putting logs on them or covering them, and then we go and talk to the people that have done it. We don't want, once we've got our development done and we've got better trails than we've got there now, we don't want people with ghost trails. We've committed to BMET to help them by where our trails go, gives them more access to the hill, and we want it to be in. We've lost the pine trees, great for mountain biking, but the native bush is actually nicer to ride in. So we don't want a lot of ghost trails on the hill. And what we've done we're doing now and in the past is we block them. There's a process we have to go through to ask for trails, and we've just done that recently to get some more trails, and some of them get knocked back, and that's life. So we can only manage it by talking to people and blocking off what's there.
So as part of what your club does is that educative process about this is a privilege, not a right, don't abuse it, be proactive about staying on the trails.
Absolutely. We have what we call our stakeholders, being the council, being the iwi, being the environmental trust, and the community board. They're our stakeholders down there. It's a privilege for us to use the hill, and we need to make sure that that's respected.
Thank you. Councillors, that brings us to time for this submission. Thanks very much to the Southland Mountain Bike Club for making a submission, for coming and joining us today. We appreciate that.
Thank you.
Jeanette Bradshaw. Welcome along, Jeanette.
Good morning.
Please have a seat. Yes, we are running. Well, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, I should say.
Our apologies, that's at our end.
To the mayor, the councillors.
Please feel free to
and
take your
Sure.
mask off. Just
Yes.
makes it a little easier for you to be heard, and have a seat if you're more
Sorry,
comfortable.
yes, I will too. So I'll just repeat myself. Good afternoon to the mayor and the councillors and all, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. Mine's about the museum. So I haven't got too much to say, but please hear me out. The building, the museum, it didn't fall down at the earthquake we had. I think it was 7.1 on the Richter scale. Now, I wasn't here at the time that it happened. I believe it was 2007 or 2008. Now, that was quite a big earthquake, and it didn't fall down, and there wasn't much went wrong with it. The engineer, I believe he made some mistakes in saying that it wasn't structurally sound, and I've heard that is the case. Why did the museum close? Was it really a political point not to pay wages so that costs could be poured into the new building, the mall? That crosses my brother's mind and my mind. The best option, I believe, and many others I've spoken to, is to keep the pyramid because it's cost effective. It's only got a 10-year compliance for the building. So after 10 years, I believe you can't do anything after that time because of the compliance. The East Street Library, where the council had thought about putting a new museum there, is way too expensive, and I believe it's a bit congested for car parks, and it's very expensive. The third option was the tennis court area next to the museum, or close to the museum rather. It's far too small, and once again, it's very expensive to rebuild. The pyramid is the best. It's cost effective. It's close to Queen's Park. There are plenty of car parks. It's a beautiful building. It's the most practical solution, and it's a nice building. At one stage, the council was talking about extending the pyramid out to the night observatory dome. But also, I'd like to add, money doesn't come out of the sky. Most people in Invercargill, they're on average wage, a lot of them. There's a lot on the meat sector and the retail sector. The inflation has gone up so much now. I mean, the power, the food, etc., the petrol. People can't afford to pay high rates because they would really go up if there was a new museum put at the tennis courts or East Street. And the most practical solution and most cost-effective solution would be to keep the pyramid and do what's necessary to it. And lastly, I'm not quite sure, maybe someone could comment on this. I believe there was some work done to the pyramid approximately 10 or 15 years ago. I don't know if anyone could comment on that. Please let me know. Structure work to the pyramid. Does anyone know about that?
Yes.
Pardon?
Yes.
Oh, could you please comment on that?
It was an investigation. There was no structural work carried out.
Okay. Well, those are my points, but I don't believe that it's not... the engineer got his facts wrong, and I believe it went through an earthquake, and it's still standing today. And those are my thoughts. And thank you very much for hearing me out.
Thanks, Jeanette. Appreciate you sharing them with us. A lot of people are shy when it comes to making a submission. So thank you for doing that, and thank you for coming along this morning and sitting through the other submissions waiting. We appreciate that.
Thanks.
Councillors, are there any questions? If not, it's a lucky escape. Thanks, Jeanette. We really appreciate that.
Thank you very much for your time.
Louise, welcome along.
Oops. I'm speaking also on the museum, and I'm taking a dead opposite of, or sort of the opposite stance to Jeanette, I think. So I want to speak on the museum and say that the public mandate historically was for a museum in the park, and that ratepayers weren't specifically questioned about the pyramid. That what the passionate opinion of the ratepayers was for the museum at the park. They are attached and love and have affinity for the museum in the park and not the CBD, so the council's preference delivers in that. The public voice didn't specifically voice or shout for a pyramid or the retention of a synthetic cladding. What they spoke up in volumes for was to retain the museum in the park. The pyramid space is ineffective. It's got no architectural merit, and it was a fix-it job for a leaky building that may have not actually fixed it. So yeah, I think it failed to fix the leaks. And actually, maybe we shouldn't do a fix-it job again to keep what is an older building, and it's also likely to encounter unforeseen problems with electrical wiring, lifts, plumbing. And actually, I was somewhere where I got my electric blanket tested, and I shouldn't say this, but I think the tradesmen that might work on the museum may perhaps say that it's a can of worms. But also with sort of likely cost overrun potentiality due to the unknown. So it's not an effective use of public money for what is not delivering you good uses of space. And anyways, cost per square metre, I think I historically submitted for a new build, but I'm a lay person, and when I read Wayne Harper's submission about the costs of per metre square board, I'm thinking, yes, that is right. Like, start afresh. Don't be hampered and constricted, or give free rein to actually design what is the best fit for the museum facilities and not have to work around. And I thought, is there flexibility around in doing a new build adjacent, which I think things were planned in parts, you've got flexibility around your storage. You don't have to move everything out and pay for costs of storing stuff in town. Or I don't know enough about that, but I imagine there's a degree of flexibility there, that you're reducing the need for off-site storage and the intense labour to do that. The bigger option, I actually would commend you for going for that, because it's future-proof, it's thinking big. We've been able to think big for all our other community assets. This is our biggest community asset. It's not just a museum and art gallery, it's a social amenity. It's actually the biggest social amenity in the city, in my opinion. I've said this, it must be a decade ago, solo dads with their kids going on the rainy day. Where do you go with your children? It's the museum, and it interlinks with the park. Elderly, where do you take your elderly 90-year-old dad? It's that cafe at the museum. Please don't scrimp on a cafe, by the way. Don't make it too small. And definitely include a little auditorium with soundproofing this time anyways. But yeah, key social amenity, widespread use, all ages. Right, we've done that. Cafe, yes, please do it well, designed and spacious. Features of Simba Antarctic and Tuatara are draw cards for tourists. And I put it in here that I don't actually see visitors to the centre as essential. I would compromise and say a good museum of difference, well done in its own right, should attract tourists as a destination. And the CBD does deserve to benefit from the location of the visitor centre there. And I think all those loyal to the museum possibly could compromise. And if a central city visitor centre is in the best interest of revitalising the CBD, the visitor centre should be there. It's a separate function, in my opinion, and probably should be de-linked from the footprint of a museum design. It's more bang for buck to spend museum money on the museum and art gallery and the cafe. All right, I think we've done that. Right, the bigger version, the stadium got its hero function. And I actually say that with it, like, seriously, other aspects of our community have been well funded, and people have spoken with passion to achieve the best. And when it fell down, the best. And I think I did establish, because I recalled that once 20 million had been set aside aeons ago for a museum or art gallery. And yes, when the stadium fell down, and that was 2009, that 20 million did get flogged, no, whatever you call it, reallocated temporarily because the stadium fell down. But so that's a long, long time ago. Anyways, and regional tourism, it's proven at national research strategy level. I went to the talk by Riverstone Holdings when they were proposing a monorail, and as part of their marketing, they had all this tourism strategy, and they're going, regional tourism assets are really key. But actually their strategists in trying to support the monorail venture spoke of regional museums. I remember this, they spoke of regional museums as being key, and actually there's not enough of them in New Zealand, and undervalued as a key regional tourism draw card and economic draw card. So tourists love museums. So the council's preferred option of 4,000 square metres is bang for bucks. It's not just that essential community infrastructure, much loved multi-purpose social amenity of a museum. It's actually an investment in tourism. And actually maybe we do have Tuatara, we have Subantarctic. We sort of do have a point of difference, and we can work on this. But actually, I read in the Self and Times Mr. Lush's opinion, and I think, yes, I agree with that it should be a museum of vision and difference. He says something unique and compelling, something innovative that will attract people from all over New Zealand and tourists. So do it new, do it well, don't scrimp, have vision, and then community funders can get on board. And then, like, some people go, oh, I'm going to miss the pyramid out my window. That's what was on Facebook. And I'm going, yes, but can you see the potentiality that ahead when a new museum comes, you go, oh, wow, I'm so proud of that museum. Can we get, like, we can enthuse and excite people for what is a new build. And actually, I don't know enough of the current design. Mr. Lush says it's okay, but that is right. The public, in going for a new build, in a way, we probably don't need to submit, but maybe we can be enthused in a process to sort of, so that the design of it, perhaps, whether it's the contents of it and the design of it, don't just do please a stock standard architectural build, do something of difference and engage the right people possibly. And then maybe now possibly, yes, there has been, I think perhaps I've spoken, the stadium fell down in 2009, so quite clearly the museum and art gallery was spoken of before that. So like, I am frustrated and angry at that a whole generation, that there has been stasis and paralysis and lack of decision. And malls eventuated another entity's vision that, Tim, that your council has rightly embraced. And there actually hasn't been a planned called into strategy, and also in the last year, a hotel, which is another entity's vision. Yes, Tim, I would actually, I need you as mayor. You're a celebrity. You put us on the map. You're a dignitary. You're liked. You're linked with the success of free fees, and you oversaw a stadium. And you speak passionately of De Quesnoy, sorry about my pronunciation, of pigs and of film studios, but actually for the last decade or two, there has been stasis and treading of water, and under your watch, I actually need your vision and your passion for this museum development. We don't need the fame of being put on the map. We need Tim for your leadership here. And actually, in recent times, I'm reading in the newspaper and in your mural columns and the subjects about yourself. I would actually like you to get on board about the museum that people need. Yes, I'm observing at meetings and functions sort of the opposite of your independence and drive. And yes, perhaps I'll leave it there. in summary, I commend the current council for unanimously advocating option 2, I think, the bigger one, was something, but for that something to have difference of both the attractions in it and design that will attract tourists and visitors from all over New Zealand.
Thanks, Louise. Councillor Amundsen.
With option 2, sorry, which is $75 million, there is a risk around that, and that is that in our budget we have allowed for $20 million of external funding. Are you happy to take that risk? Because it is possible that we might not be able to get all of that funding if we go for that option, which would mean we would have to come back to ratepayers again to increase the amount.
Actually, I am, and this actually, I do respect this, that is right. We now, without this a grand vision over the last decades, we've sort of been ad hoc, that we are substantially financially committed, but I don't know that it makes it right not to go for what is the best option. So I think, yes, we absolutely should. And actually, some sections of the community, that's right, they're able to engage the funders. I watch it happen. So like the arts or the social amenities of the city are no lesser in priority, and perhaps those funders where they've contributed in the past, like that is right, but they ought to contribute to that same level for this amenity as has been seen in the past. Substantial, I hope. Yes, we should.
Thank you. Councillors, we're at time and I'm looking to move things on. Louise, as always, it's a really well-constructed submission from you. You've just dropped your mask. And thank you for coming along this afternoon. We appreciate it. Carolyn, it is lovely to see you again. I hope that your recovery is going well. Tony will...
Slowly but steady.
Excellent.
Very slow though. At least I'm out of hospital.
Yes.
Oh, what's that?
Oh, that's just a trapdoor that you've wheeled over, don't worry.
Gave me a fright. Okay, I'm Karen Weston. Kia ora, everybody. I'm representing the Blind Citizens Southland branch, and we put in a submission. I'd just like to focus on 2 items within our submission. The first one is to do with the proposed rate increase. In the strategic plan that was our long-term plan, it had 4%. Now we notice with inflation and rising costs all over the world that you want to have an increase of 7% for ratepayers. Our concern is that most of our members are blind, well, they're all blind or vision impaired, but most of them are on fixed incomes, and those of us who do pay rates either through rent or through living in a retirement village or paying rates through owning a house are on fixed incomes, as I said, and we had to economise, and we know that council, like everyone else, is facing inflation as well, and maybe you need to look at economising as well. You do have assets, capital assets, and those other financial benefits that some of us don't have. So we can't go and sell a building or sell a forest or anything like that unless we have access to that, which none of us do. So I think that, and our members are just concerned that here again there's another increase in expenditure in our budgets, and we just don't have the income, and what we're going to lose is probably going to be food and maybe going somewhere to the doctors or using total mobility, which is quite good at present, but maybe not in the future. So we just don't know how our members will manage with the rate increase. The other thing I want to talk about is accessible buses. Before the bus routes were changed, we had one of the best in fact, I will say it was the best bus system for accessibility for blind people in New Zealand. that has been removed once the routes were changed because the audio announcements on the bus became obsolete. So we did ask Russell Pearson and Nathan Gill about this, and were they going to replace the audio announcements, and they said they would, and they had been working with the Otago Environment Council, and they had some very technological guy up there that was working on it. And this was last year, long before I had my accident. And we haven't heard any more about it, and we've asked our colleagues in Otago, and they haven't heard anything about it either. So if we're going to retain accessibility for our buses, the council needs to have a goal in your annual plan, which is a time frame of expectation that the audio announcements will be back in the buses so blind people can access the information properly, where we are and what we're doing and how we're getting there. I just would like to remind council, as you are part of a local body, which is part of a government agency, that you are accountable to the United Nations Rights on People with Disabilities Convention, and I think that it's really important that the council does have some way of monitoring this goal with the chief executive, ensuring that we do have some time frames, that we know when the audio announcements will come back, and that we can have a very accessible buses again, and our members will feel confident about riding buses again. I guess most of the people will know one of our members, Vic West, who rides the buses quite a lot. And I don't know how he's managing. He's quite hearing impaired as well. So one of the important things is that we did ask Russell that we'd like to be consulted with regards to the system of audio announcements, because there are some systems out there that are not accessible to everybody, because not everyone owns a smartphone or know how to use a smartphone. So it needs to be something that everyone can access, not just those with smartphones. And we are very, very interested in keeping our partnership with council in regards to access issues. So I'd just like to just note that when I came into the council building to this meeting, there was no screen readers on the signing in machines, and so I asked the guy down there, have they got screen readers and audio, and he said no. And I said, why not? Because council has got that disability strategy, and I don't know when that's going to be looked at. It was supposed to be about a year ago now. And so if you've got the strategy, then you should be working towards it. And if you get something new technology, for goodness sake, make sure the screen reader's there. Supermarkets and you go to Pack and Save or Countdown or any of those places, they've got screen readers on their checkout machines. So if they've got it, you can put it on your sign-in machine. So that was just a little bit of an addition, because I didn't know you had the sign-in machine till I got here. But I just feel that council needs to be more accountability for access for people with disabilities right across the board. Even just getting out of the car into this building, Tony had difficulty getting me from the road, and we had to go behind the car, our car, to get me onto the footpath. So he's not getting any younger either. So I just feel that we aren't.
Like you needed the reminder, Tony.
Yeah, well, none of us are getting any younger. So I just feel that we need to have more access for all disabled people, but especially let's get back to being the best city in the New Zealand, having accessible buses for blind people and people with vision impairment.
Thanks, Carolyn. Thanks for your submission, your reminders about affordability, and for raising the point about audio description. I envisage we'll be able to get a written response to that back to the association. Councillor Soper.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Leslie Soper, Carolyn. Great to see you out of hospital. Hi, Tony. Carolyn, a previous submitter mentioned that he didn't believe the rates rebate scheme was well enough known in Invercargill. Do you feel that the blind citizens community are being made aware enough and being given the support to be able to apply to the scheme?
I don't even know if some of the people would have that information. I mean, I know about it, and I guess that's an option for people who own their own houses. But if you rent a house, for example, and some people do, I mean, that rate rebate scheme isn't going to help them. The landlord's going to put, if the rates go up, the landlord's going to put the rent up for those people anyway. So it would help some people, but I'm not sure if that information is accessible. Like council used to have a newsletter, and that used to go onto the telephone information service, but I don't know if you have a newsletter that comes in the mail to everybody nowadays or not. But if
there's one that comes with the rates.
Oh, okay. So if there's a newsletter that comes with the rates in print, it would be good to put that on the telephone information centre, because I believe that the council still has a menu on the telephone information centre. You just need to get hold of Blind Low Vision NZ, which used to be Blind Foundation, and they run telephone information centre. You do have to pay for it these days, but I think you did anyway, so yeah.
Thanks, Carolyn.
Reverend Cook.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kia ora, Carolyn. I'm Evelyn Cook. I have a question about, you said we had the best system. Was that because of the audio announcements? So your concern isn't with the change of routes, it's with the fact that with the change of routes has gone that announcement system?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So your concerns would be addressed by a new commentary.
Yes. So I don't understand why there's such a delay in having to get a new commentary. I mean, Eddie Cook set up the one that we had, and he must have got that done somewhere. And we don't need to get into a new system or anything like that. There's nothing wrong with the system we had, and all they had to do is just get it recorded and put into the buses and speakers and stuff, and the speakers will be already in the buses unless you've got new buses. I can't go on a bus because I don't think Tony will want to push me up our hill. But anyway, I'm sure that we could still have the same system which is accessible to all. I know that some public didn't like it, and maybe the bus drivers didn't always like it, but it didn't just help blind people. It really is beneficial if you are a tourist and you go to a strange city, and if you have audio announcements in buses, it really does help you to learn your way around that strange city, because we found that in Switzerland, for example. We ended up with a bus and it had audio, and we knew we couldn't speak German or whatever language it was, but we knew by the sound of the suburb that we were in the suburb, and we just needed to ask someone who spoke English, are we far away from that stop we wanted? And they just said no, it's 2 away. So it really is handy for other people, not just blind people.
Thank you. Okay, councillors, that brings us to the conclusion of that submission. Carolyn and Tony, lovely to see you both again. Thank you very much for your submission and for making the time available to join us this afternoon.
Yeah.
Councillors, you'll recall we agreed to accommodate a spoken submission from Nikki Broad from Coopers Creek. If you're looking for Nikki's written submission, it's on board books on 339. Nikki, thanks for coming back.
Thank you for letting me in.
If you want to grab that seat, you're most welcome.
Oh, I might stand.
Do you want to drop your mask?
Oh, no,
It'll make it a little easier to hear.
I am a sloucher normally, so. I might keep my mask on
Okay.
if I can read my writing, otherwise I have to take it off to read it with my glasses. But thank you for letting me fit in. I wasn't going to speak because I didn't want to put the same information as other people were doing, but I realise it spread slightly outside the area to the draft plan itself and the licence to occupy. So there's something I'd like to bring up because it's very important going ahead from here and relevant to what's the licence to occupy. So please excuse if it's a wee bit jumbled because it's just seat of the pants at the back of the room with one ear listening to everything. So I have been a permanent resident for over 37 years, and I emphasise permanent residence to Sandy. That's been known to the council, and we've had a good relationship with the council, perhaps a bit oozy-oozy in today's terms, but we've had, I recognise, the point is that I don't recognise many faces from way back. Mr Pottinger, Leslie Sofa, Right Honourable Tim Shadbolt. That's really about it. And the basis of the problem is there's new blood that doesn't know the past history that we've had with the council. And there's quite a bit that's in the management plan. And if you read the management plan, and I certainly did when we got the thing, we went back through everything and it was a good wake-up call for everybody. But there are things in there that were not agreed to council and after the previous management plan, but were never changed. So I'll just get back to a few brief notes, and they might be a bit jumbled because back of the room stuff. But there has been a continual, this is the basis of all the problems with Sandy Point and the Crips, that the Parks and Reserves were in charge under Mr Pagan of the management plan for Sandy Point, and they've done a wonderful job. It's very comprehensive and gets even more comprehensive as time goes on. And it's a very necessary document. But I have to say it, Mr Pagan, that was his baby, and he was on the agenda. He didn't want to see it. That's why it appears over and over again, with reasons. The council, however, when we brought it up time after time, had different opinions to what was in the management plan. And we have a lot of this in writing so that it's not just words, we have old memos that state it very clearly. So that's the basis there. Between what was historically in the record and i.e. the management plan and what the council agreement between promoters is not the same. But somehow the new management plan would still come out without the agreed changes being made. If they'd been in there, you would realise certain things that you won't be aware of. Sorry. It's very hard when you haven't written it neatly or tidily. The past council has heard us and taken a vote that appreciated our value to the area, being that we're the end of the road for visitors, and it's quite a long road. If you live out there for 37 years, you've seen people stuck on the beach, you've seen people with young babies stuck in the sand at the entrance to the beach, the other entrance of the estuary. It's very hard now because, as was said, we don't have a handle on vandalism, which is very great out there, as it is everywhere. And that is a worry to us. The other worry would be now that with our climate change, it's a very dry season. You have to be aware the fire danger is probably into the future is continue to be very high over summer. However, and just thinking about the end, Rob McMurdo put out 3 fires at Whaler Bay that were lit by people that could have had serious consequences. Now that's just might be small bananas, but if the council acknowledged we were of value for various reasons, there's a lot more. Now, one good thing that's come out of this discord that we've been having is we did go over the management plan, most of us, trying to find other things, and I reread it. I've been there 37 years and I've taken it a bit for granted. I realised that, and I've suddenly woken up, and I'm very pleased at some of the things that are in that management plan that I hadn't taken any notice of. The fact that I always thought Oe was more Whalers Bay. Apparently Oe is the crib sites. So that's a Maori heritage area. I think that's really good. And in your management plan, it wants to put signage of the history of Sandy Point round. Unless it's set in concrete, and even then Hoon would put a tow rope round it and it would go. Who's going to put, if you put signage to do with the Maori villages there, we can look after it. They're safe between the houses. If you put it anywhere else, there wouldn't be much point. We would welcome a change from the word Cooper's Creek to be added probably first, Oe, since that is Oe, or was Oe. There were things I found out because I've looked elsewhere in library, history, etc. We found out things like the Maori graves. They might be closer than we think, though not on the house sites. So we really have all woken up and decided, yes, we're so lucky out here and we want to value it and we want to add to it. Now, but if I make a couple of examples to show how the disconnect between what we've agreed in the council and what's come out in the management plan and what you've based yours on, which is exactly what you're supposed to do. The biggest one would be the change from residential C, which allowed the cribs in the first place, to suddenly appear in the management plan where we didn't spot it, that the zoning had been changed to recreation reserve. So the land we sit on is no longer residential C, which allowed houses, but reserve land. Now that's the basis of we must go. You can't have occupied houses on recreation land. Okay, that's fair enough. But, and excuse me if I quote you, Right Honourable Mr Shadbolt. Mr Shadbolt, and one of our, came over and had a cup of tea just by himself, so he could, not representing the council, but just as an individual, had a cup of tea with us at Cooper's Creek, and he said, I never even knew these houses were here. And the reason is, councillors, and that's understandable, don't read everything that comes over their desks. They rely on the manager to have it just right, glance through the worst, you know, the main bits, and sign it off. So inadvertently, the council, and this is acknowledged in writing, said we would never have signed it from residential C to recreation reserve if we had known it was in the book. Now you won't remember, Mr Pottinger, that there was supposed to be a working party. Mr King's was, this is all coming signed off by Mr King, so Mr King was really the driver of it. We will set up a working party between the crib owners and the council to try and reverse it back to residential C. Now, being those oozy-oozy, time passed and it never actually happened because we didn't look into the future. It was like, well, it hasn't happened yet. We must get onto it, and from both sides, obviously. So that's historically it. The council wanted us there as residential C. Now, under residential C, it still says you must only have casual occupancy. However, at a later date, because there's been a few of these meetings over these years, council acknowledged due to vandalism, if the houses were there, permanent occupancy would have to be accepted because if they were empty, they would be vandalised. So this is a different picture to what's in the management plan. And what I'm basically want to say is, with the management plan coming up, it needs not one party to another, but three parties involved so that the management plan, when it comes out, is exactly right into the future. So they're just things for council who know nothing about it, that background exists. And there are things out there, we all woke up a bit and said, oh, this is Maori land. I hadn't considered that because I thought, oh, it was somewhere, it was at Noki Kaiko, it was this. Right. Okay, let's go in there and let's take out all the historical junk that's been there from previous tenants. It's in the bush area, lots of old iron and things. Let's go in there, let's clean it out. And that's what we've been doing gradually. Well, we've almost won. old water tanks, piles of iron, all sorts of rubbish that has no bearing on us and certainly shouldn't be anywhere near Maori heritage or ecological reserve. So we're not perfect, none of us are, but, and I have to say, just as I've gone right off my notes, but that's basically it. I was a postie, but before that, until I took voluntary redundancy because the hospital, when the new hospital was built, I was manager for Southland Area Health Board grounds for all of Southland. I'm very familiar with management plans, both forestry, native bush, residences, because I covered the whole lot. So I looked at the management plan. I thought, if I had this management plan and I wanted to follow it, this is what I would do. But the lacking thing is the consultation to put a proper management plan into place in the first place. If that's done, you have every rule. If a rule is broken after that, fine, you have the power. But you have to accept that, we have a big vested interest in South. I'm a member of Forest and Bird, and I intend to go into the council meeting that they're holding with Parks and Reserves this coming Sunday to talk about the development of Sandy Point. Since I retired 2 years ago, have taken it on myself because I have the horticultural skills to start caring place plants where I have sprayed both my own. Next door to me had a huge patch, which I rather liked, but the minute I thought about it, I thought, pest plants have got to go. So I've cleared, and it's very difficult, you've got to go over and over, huge areas of aluminium plant, wandering Jew, and there's still an awful lot out there. But I volunteer my services within the residential area to take care. You can point out things you want to go, and I know what has to go, and I will do the donkey work. I'm very happy to do that. So I'll just, if I've got half a second.
No.
Sorry.
We've gone way over time, Nikki.
Yes, you regret inviting me now. Well, that's about it, because the rest of it will come up when the management plan, but if we could settle what's on the agenda now, bearing in mind that that licence to occupy has clauses in there that were certainly in the management plan. You could look at them and say, yes, they have to be in there, but with the past history, no, they can't be in there.
Thank you, Nikki, for your submission and for coming back and speaking to it. We appreciate that. I'd like to open it for questions, but if you want to get something to eat before your next meeting, we've got a train of 3 to go.
Just got one question. Very quick question. It's a yes or no question.
Oh, excellent.
The question is, and the answer will be yes or no. Back in 1992, I found that's when it became a reserve. Was there public consultation on the change?
I believe there was newspaper. It came out in the newspaper, and we had things. I'd have the paperwork there. I can't exactly say. I haven't been dealing with it closely but I believe that yes, it's been in the newspaper, and we had the support of, say, the Otatara Community Board, etc., etc. Hence the newspaper articles saying that were produced that said that council has changed its plans on Sandy Point.
Okay.
We're trying to put it in a chronological order,
right.
And it's a bit hard because some of the stuff isn't dated, and my memory for dates and times is hopeless.
I can find out.
Oh, sorry. Yes
No, that's okay. We'll just dig a bit deeper to see if it was consulted on. That's fine.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Thanks, Nikki. I appreciate
Thank you very much.
your coming back.
And am I allowed to just say one thing? When the Right Honourable Tim Shadbelt came out and had a cup of tea, we had a jolly great laugh, and I'm sure it reminded him of his early days on a commune. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, that brings us to the end of people speaking to the submissions. Thank you for your attendance and your attention, and our sincere thanks to those people who've made submissions and taken the time to come along and address us. The deliberations were scheduled for next Tuesday. I understand that may well be delayed. So there's a suggestion that might now be coming up on the 24th, so there'll be an adjustment to your diaries for that. I thank you, and I will close the hearing submission.